you lying awake tonight, carrying the weight of grief? Perhaps you've lost someone irreplaceable, and the pain feels unbearable. You search for healing grief, some way, any way, to ease the ache that never seems to leave. You're not alone in this darkness. Millions search for Buddhist meditation on death, for coping with death of a loved one, hoping to find even a moment of peace. The weight of loss can feel so isolating, as if no one could possibly understand the depth of your sorrow. But tonight, I want to share something with you, an ancient story from the Buddhist teachings about a woman who walked exactly where you walk now. Her name was Kisāgotamī, and her journey from the depths of unbearable grief to profound peace holds a teaching so powerful, so transformative, that it has guided countless hearts through their darkest nights. For over 2,500 years, this is not just acceptance, meditation. This is a path through loss that the Buddha himself offered, a teaching that transforms the loneliest suffering into the deepest compassion. By the end of this meditation, you'll understand something profound, that your grief, while it feels so personal, so unique, connects you to every human being who has ever loved and ever lost. Tonight, as you listen to Kisāgotamī's story, you'll discover that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means opening your heart wide enough to hold both the love and the loss with equal tenderness. Let this ancient wisdom guide you into sleep, into rest, into the beginning of healing. Before we begin, I'd like to ask you something. Leave a comment below and simply share what time it is where you are. Are you listening at midnight, 3 a.m., or perhaps in the quiet of the evening? There's something beautiful about knowing that around the world, in different time zones, different lives, we're all gathered here, connected by this shared moment of seeking peace. Your comment, however brief, helps this teaching reach others who need it too. Take one breath, just one, a little deeper than usual, and let it go completely. That's all. No special technique, no effort, just breathing, just being. And now, let's begin. The story of Kisāgotamī, whose name means the frail one, who lost everything, and in losing everything, found the path to freedom, to peace, to understanding that would light her way through the rest of her life, and light the way for countless others, including you, tonight. In ancient India, in a time when the Buddha walked the earth, there lived a young woman. Her name was Kisāgotamī, which means the frail one. She was born into poverty, into hardship. Her family had little, and she herself was thin, delicate, not considered particularly beautiful by the standards of her time. When she came of age to marry, no family wanted her. They saw only her frailty, her poverty. They didn't see her heart, her strength, her capacity for love. She was rejected again and again, and with each rejection, she felt smaller, less worthy, as if the world itself was telling her she didn't belong. But one day, a kind man from her own poor community, he looked beyond what others saw. He saw not her frailty, but her spirit, not her poverty, but her dignity. And he asked her, to be his wife. For the first time in her life, Kisāgotamī felt chosen, wanted, worthy. She married with such gratitude, such hope. Finally, she thought, she had found her place in the world. But even in marriage, her life was not easy. Her husband's family treated her, much as the world had always treated her, with disregard, with disdain. She was just another mouth to feed, another pair of hands to work. Nothing special, nothing valued, until she became pregnant. As her belly grew, something shifted. Her husband's family began to look at her differently, with anticipation, with hope. A child, especially a son, would bring honor to the family, would continue the family name, and Kisāgotamī, who had never been valued for anything, suddenly found herself the center of attention, of care. She felt it, this change, and in her heart, she knew this child growing inside her was her chance, her opportunity to finally truly belong. When the baby came, it was a boy, a beautiful, perfect baby boy. And in that moment, when she first held him in her arms, Kisāgotamī felt a love so vast, so overwhelming. She couldn't have imagined its depth. This was her son, her child, the proof of her worth. The family celebrated. For the first time, they embraced her, praised her. She had given them what they wanted, and finally she felt she belonged. She poured every ounce of her being into this child. She watched his every breath, marveled at his tiny fingers, his curious eyes, the way he learned to smile, to laugh, to reach for her face. Every day with him was a gift. Every moment, precious beyond measure. He was everything, her reason, her purpose, her proof that she mattered, that her life had meaning. She didn't just love him, she was him. Her identity, her very sense of self, became wrapped so completely in this child that she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. And then, one day, when the boy was still very small, just beginning to walk, just beginning to speak his first words, he fell ill. At first it seemed like nothing. Children get sick, they recover. But this time, the fever didn't break. His breathing grew labored. His little body, so recently full of life, began to weaken. Kisāgotamī didn't sleep, didn't eat. She held him, prayed, begged whatever gods might listen, to spare him, to take her instead, to take anything, but not her son. But the illness didn't care about her prayers, didn't care about her love, didn't care that this child was the center of her universe. One morning, as the sun rose, her baby boy stopped breathing. The light went out of his eyes, his small body grew still, and Kisāgotamī's world ended. Not metaphorically, not dramatically, it simply ended. The person she had been, the mother, the woman who finally mattered, ceased to exist. In that instant, she was no one, nothing, a shell holding a small, lifeless body. What happened next is difficult for us to fully understand, unless we too have lost someone we couldn't survive without, unless we too have felt that complete shattering of reality itself. Kisāgotamī could not accept what had happened. Her mind simply refused it. This couldn't be real, couldn't be final. There had to be a way. There had to be someone who could help. She wrapped her son's body in cloth, cradled him in her arms, and she began to walk, door to door, through her village, through the streets, carrying her dead child, asking, pleading, begging for medicine. Please, she would say, her voice cracking. "My son is sick. Do you have medicine? Do you know someone who can help?" People stared, some with pity, some with horror. Some turned away, unable to bear the sight of this young woman, clearly in shock, carrying her dead baby as if he might still be saved. "He's gone," they would say, gently, or not so gently. "There is no medicine for death. You must let him go. You must perform the funeral rites." But Kisāgotamī couldn't hear them, wouldn't hear them. No, they were wrong. Someone, somewhere, knew how to bring him back. She just had to find them, had to keep looking. She walked from house to house, from healer to healer, her feet bleeding, her voice hoarse, her arms aching, from carrying her child's weight. But she couldn't stop. To stop was to accept, and to accept was to die. The family, watching her, didn't know what to do. They grieved for the child, but they also pitied her, feared for her. This wasn't normal grief. This was something else, something broken. Some people began to whisper that she had gone mad, that the grief had destroyed her mind, and perhaps, in a way, it had. The person Kisāgotamī had been, the woman who had finally found her place, that person could not survive the loss of this child. So she had fractured, splintered, into something no longer quite human. But then someone kind, pulled her aside. "Kisāgotamī," they said softly, "I cannot help you, but I know someone who might. There is a teacher, a holy man. They call him the Buddha, the awakened one. He is staying just outside the city. They say he has great wisdom, great power. Perhaps he can help you. Go to him. Ask him for medicine." And suddenly, Kisāgotamī had hope, a direction. The Buddha, yes, she had heard of him. Everyone had. He was said to perform miracles, to understand what others couldn't. If anyone could bring her son back, it would be him. She turned and began to run, still carrying her baby, still believing that death was not final, that love could be stronger than death itself. She found the Buddha, sitting under a tree, surrounded by his disciples, teaching. His presence, even from a distance, radiated a kind of peace Kisāgotamī had never encountered. Something vast, unshakable. She didn't wait for permission, didn't care about protocol. She pushed through the gathered crowd and fell at his feet, her dead son, still cradled in her arms. "Please," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. "Please, great teacher, they say you have wisdom, power. My son, he's sick. I need medicine. Please, if you know of any medicine that can help him, please give it to me." The disciples, uncomfortable, began to speak, to explain what they could see so clearly. But the Buddha raised his hand, silencing them. His eyes, deep with compassion, met Kisāgotamī's. He didn't look away. He didn't flinch. He saw her grief, her desperation, her complete shattering, and he didn't try to fix it with empty words. "I can help you," he said, his voice gentle, steady. "There is medicine, but to prepare it, I need a special ingredient." Kisāgotamī's heart leapt. Medicine. He had medicine. "Anything," she said. "I'll get anything. Tell me what you need." The Buddha smiled, so sadly, so kindly. "Go into the city," he said, "and bring me a handful of mustard seeds. And this is important, the seeds must come from a household where no one has ever died. Not a father, not a mother, not a child, not a servant, no one. Find me such a household, and bring the seeds, and then I will prepare the medicine for your son." Kisāgotamī barely heard the conditions. Mustard seeds. She could do that. Easy. Every household had mustard seeds. She would find them, bring them back, and the Buddha would save her son. She didn't even thank him. She just turned and ran back into the city, back to the doors she had knocked on before, this time with purpose, with a task. The Buddha had given her hope. She knocked on the first door. "Please," she said, "I need a handful of mustard seeds. It's urgent." "Of course," the family said, happy to help. They went to fetch the seeds, but Kisāgotamī, suddenly remembering, called out, "Wait, has anyone in your household ever died?" The family paused, looked at each other. "Well, yes," they said. "Of course. My father passed away last year, and before that, my grandfather, and..." Kisāgotamī didn't wait to hear more. "I'm sorry," she said. "The seeds must come from a house where no one has died." And she moved to the next door. The same question, the same answer. "Has anyone died?" "Yes. My mother, my uncle, my baby sister. Years ago." "No. Next house. Has anyone died?" "Yes. My husband. Just last month." "No. Next house." "Yes. My grandmother." "Next house." "Yes. My son." "Next house." "Yes. My wife." Door after door, house after house, street after street. Every family had lost someone, a parent, a child, a spouse, a friend. Death had visited every single home, and slowly, as the sun began to set, as Kisāgotamī's feet carried her through the entire city, something began to shift. Inside her, a crack in the wall of her grief. She had thought her suffering was unique, that no one could possibly understand, that her loss was different, more unbearable than anyone else's. But now, going door to door, hearing story after story of death, of loss, of families shattered just as hers had been, she began to see she wasn't alone. She had never been alone. Death had not singled her out, had not punished her specifically. Death was visiting every home, every heart, every family. Rich or poor, loved or unloved, death came for everyone. As darkness fell, Kisāgotamī found herself standing at the edge of the city. She had knocked on every door, asked every family, and not one, not a single one, could give her what she needed, because death had touched every single home. She looked down at the small body in her arms, her son, still wrapped, still held, but now, finally, she could see. He wasn't sleeping, wasn't sick, he was dead, gone, and no mustard seed, no medicine, no amount of searching could bring him back. The truth, which she had been running from, which her mind had refused to accept, finally broke through. Her son was dead, and nothing could change that. She fell to her knees, right there at the edge of the city, and she wept, not the frantic, desperate crying of before, but something deeper, something that came from the very core of her being. She wept not just for her son, but for every mother, every father, every person who had ever held someone they loved and watched them slip away. She wept for the grandmother whose husband had died, for the father whose daughter had died, for the woman whose mother had died, for all of them, for herself, for the universal, inescapable truth of loss. And in that weeping, something extraordinary happened. Her grief, which had felt so isolating, so personal, began to expand. It was still grief, still painful, but it was no longer hers alone. It was everyone's. She was crying the tears of all humanity, and somehow, in that shared, unbearable sorrow, there was the smallest seed, of peace. She understood what the Buddha had known, what he had so compassionately guided her to discover for herself. That death is not a punishment, not a mistake, not something that happens to some people and not others. Death is universal. Death is the one experience that every being who has ever lived will share. Her son was not special in his death, and neither was her grief. And somehow, that truth, instead of diminishing her love or her pain, actually held it, gave it context, gave it meaning. She was not alone. She had never been alone. Every parent who had ever loved a child and lost them walked with her. Every person who had ever felt this pain understood. They were all connected by this most human, most universal of experiences, loss. Slowly, Kisāgotamī rose, her legs shaking, her body exhausted. She looked one last time at her son's face, and she whispered, "I loved you. I will always love you. But now, I must let you go." She carried him to the cremation ground. And there, with her own hands, she performed the funeral rites that she had been unable to face before. She watched as the flames took his body, released him, transformed him back into elements, into earth, into air, into the same universal substance from which all things arise and to which all things return. And when it was done, when the fire had burned down and only ashes remained, she turned and walked back to the Buddha. It was late when Kisāgotamī arrived back at the tree where she had left the Buddha. Most of the disciples had retired for the night, but the Buddha was still there, sitting, as if he had been waiting, as if he had known she would return. She approached, slowly. This time her hands were empty. No baby, no desperate pleading, just a woman, exhausted, grief-stricken, but somehow present, whole. Despite the breaking, she sat before him, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The Buddha simply looked at her with such understanding, such compassion, as if he had walked every step of her journey with her. Finally, Kisāgotamī spoke, her voice quiet, raw. "I couldn't find the mustard seeds. Every house has known death, every single one." The Buddha nodded. "Yes," he said gently. "Death is universal. It is the one thing all beings must face. Rich and poor, loved and unloved, the powerful and the powerless, death comes to all." "Why?" Kisāgotamī asked, not angrily, but genuinely. "Why must it be this way? Why do we love if loss is inevitable?" The Buddha was silent for a moment. Then he said, "This is the first noble truth, the truth of suffering, of dukkha. All things that arise must pass away. All things that come together must separate. This is not a flaw in existence. It is the nature of existence itself. But the pain," Kisāgotamī whispered, "the pain is unbearable." "Yes," the Buddha said, "it is. When we grasp, when we cling, when we believe that we can hold onto what is impermanent, the pain is unbearable. But Kisāgotamī, what if we loved not despite impermanence, but because of it? What if the very fact that all things must pass makes them more precious, not less?" Kisāgotamī felt something shift in her chest. She thought of her son, the way she had loved him. Every moment had felt so precious, and it was because somewhere deep down she had known. She had always known that time was limited, that nothing lasts forever. "The love you felt for your son," the Buddha continued, "was real, is real. Death cannot take that away. The grief you feel now is the other side of that love. They are inseparable. To love is to open yourself to loss. But would you choose not to have loved him, to avoid this pain? No, Kisāgotamī said immediately, tears streaming down her face. Never, even knowing how it ends, I would choose to love him, again and again. Then you understand, the Buddha said. The teaching, life is precious because it is impermanent. Love is profound because we know it will not last forever. And grief, painful as it is simply love with nowhere to go. Kisāgotamī sat with this, felt it sink in. She would never stop grieving her son. The pain would always be there, but now it had context, meaning it wasn't a punishment. It wasn't proof that she was cursed. It was the natural consequence of having loved deeply, completely. What do I do now? She asked, her voice small, vulnerable. You live, the Buddha said simply. You honor your son's life by living, by understanding what you have learned, by offering the compassion you now carry to others who suffer as you have suffered. This grief, if you let it, can transform you, can open your heart to all beings, because now you know what it means to lose, and you will never be able to turn away from another person's pain without recognizing it as your own. And Kisāgotamī, in that moment, felt it, the possibility that this terrible, unbearable loss could become something else, not good, not welcome, but meaningful. That her son's short life and her deep grief could become a bridge, a connection to all who suffer, to all who love, to all who lose. I want to learn, she said, her voice stronger now. I want to understand more deeply. I want to walk this path, the path to freedom, to peace. Not peace from grief, but peace with grief. Peace that can hold both love and loss, without breaking. The Buddha smiled. Then stay, he said. Learn, practice. The path is here, and you, Kisāgotamī, you are ready. Because you have touched the first noble truth, not with your mind, but with your whole being. And so, she stayed. Kisāgotamī became one of the Buddha's disciples. She shaved her head, wore the simple robes of a nun, and she practiced every day. Meditation, mindfulness, studying the teachings, walking the path. At first, the grief was still overwhelming. There were mornings when she woke and for a brief moment forgot that her son was gone, and then the reality would crash back, and the pain would be as fresh as the day she lost him. But she learned to sit with that pain, to breathe with it, to let it move through her without drowning in it. The Buddha had taught her that suffering comes not from pain itself, but from our resistance to pain, from our belief that it shouldn't be, that we shouldn't have to feel it. But pain is part of life, and grief is the price we pay for love. To fight it, to resist it, only intensifies it. But to accept it, to make space for it, to say, yes, this is what I feel, this is what it means to be human. That was the path to peace. She learned another teaching too, the teaching of anatta, of no self, that there is no permanent, unchanging self, that what we think of as I, as me, is actually a constantly changing flow of experiences, thoughts, feelings, sensations. The Kisāgotamī who had been a young bride was not the same as the Kisāgotamī who became a mother, and the mother was not the same as the woman who lost her child, and that woman was not the same as the nun who now practiced the path. Each moment, she was new, different, shaped by what had come before, but not trapped by it. She didn't have to be forever defined by her loss. She could be someone new, someone who carried that loss, but was not consumed by it. And perhaps most importantly, she learned metta, loving kindness, compassion, for herself, for others, for all beings who struggle, who suffer, who love, who lose. She would sit in meditation and send loving kindness to her son, wherever, whatever he was now. May you be happy, may you be peaceful, may you be free. And then she would expand that love to all children, to all mothers, to all beings who have known loss. May you be free from suffering. May you find peace. May you know that you are not alone. Her heart, which had felt so broken, so closed, began to open, wider than it had ever been, because now it held not just her own pain, but the pain of all beings. And in holding all that pain, it also held all that love, all that connection. Years passed. Kisāgotamī became known among the nuns as one of the most devoted practitioners. She memorized the teachings, meditated for hours, and most remarkably, she began to teach, to counsel others who came to her. In their own grief, in their own loss, they would come, these grieving parents, these widows, these orphans, and they would sit with her, and she would listen, really listen, with her whole being, because she knew she had been exactly where they were. She had felt the same unbearable pain, and then gently she would share her story, the Buddha's teaching, the truth that they were not alone, that death is universal, that grief is love, that pain, while unbearable, can be held, can be transformed, can become compassion. Many people found solace in her words, found strength in her example. Still finding meaning, still offering love. One day, after many years of practice, Kisāgotamī was sitting in meditation, and something shifted. A deep, profound shift. It was as if suddenly she saw, really saw, the nature of all things. She saw that everything is impermanent, rising and passing away, every thought, every sensation, every feeling, everything in constant flux, nothing to hold on to, nothing solid, nothing permanent. And in seeing that, truly seeing that with her whole being, she felt something release, the last remnant of grasping, the last whisper of the belief that things should be different than they are. She saw that her son had been a collection of causes and conditions, born from her body, but not belonging to her, living for a time, and then dissolving back into the stream of existence, just as she would one day dissolve, just as all beings dissolve. And there was no tragedy in this, only truth, only the way things are, have always been, will always be. In that moment, Kisāgotamī attained what the Buddha called arahant, full enlightenment, liberation, freedom from suffering, not freedom from pain, but freedom from the belief that pain should not be, freedom from clinging, from grasping, from the illusion of permanence. She opened her eyes, and she smiled, not because the grief was gone. The memory of her son was still there, the love was still there, but now it was held in something vaster, something that could contain all of it, the love, the loss, the joy, the sorrow, all of it part of the vast, flowing river of existence. She had become one of the Buddha's most enlightened disciples, and her teaching, her story, would be remembered and passed down for thousands of years, not because she had avoided suffering, but because she had walked straight through it and emerged, transformed. The frail one had become unshakable, not because nothing could hurt her, but because she had learned to hold everything with wisdom, with compassion, with acceptance of what is. And so, Kisāgotamī's story offers us something profound, something that each of us, in our own way, needs to hear. That grief is not a sign of weakness, It is not proof that you're doing something wrong. Grief is simply love that has nowhere to go. It is the measure of how deeply you cared, how completely you loved. The Buddha didn't take away Kisāgotamī's pain. He didn't offer empty comfort. He didn't say, "Don't be sad. They're in a better place. Time will heal." Instead, he walked with her, guided her to see the truth. That death is universal. That loss connects us all. That in our deepest, most personal suffering, we are never truly alone. Tonight, as you listen, you might be carrying your profound own loss, your own grief. It might be recent, raw, unbearable, or it might be old, carried for years, a dull ache that never quite goes away. And what Kisāgotamī's story invites you to consider is this: your grief is not a problem to be solved. It is an experience to be held, to be witnessed, to be accepted. Not because acceptance means you're okay with what happened, but because acceptance means you stop fighting what is already true. Your loved one is gone, and you are still here, still breathing, still feeling, still somehow living. And that, as painful as it is the reality. The truth you must eventually meet, perhaps tonight, as sleep begins to find you. You might try something gentle, something Kisāgotamī learned. Instead of pushing away the grief, instead of numbing it or drowning in it, what if you just made space for it? What if you said to yourself, "This is grief. This is what grief feels like, and it's okay to feel this. You don't have to fix it. Don't have to understand it. Don't have to be over it. You just acknowledge it. Give it permission to be there. Because it is there, whether you acknowledge it or not. And then, if you can, expand your awareness. Just a little. Remember that somewhere in this vast world, someone else is feeling exactly what you feel. They've lost someone they couldn't imagine living without. And they're lying awake just like you, wondering how they'll survive this pain. You are not alone. Your grief is not unique. It is universal. It is human. And in recognizing that, in feeling that connection, even to strangers you've never met, there is the smallest seed of comfort. Kisāgotamī's son lived for only a brief time, but his life and her grief became a teaching that has touched millions. Your loss, your pain, your love, it matters. It ripples out in ways you cannot see. It connects you to the great, vast web of human experience. You are part of something so much larger than your individual suffering. And that suffering, painful as it is also what makes you beautifully, heartbreakingly human. As sleep takes you now, let yourself rest in this truth. You have loved, you have lost, and you are still here, still worthy, still held by the same vast compassion that held Kisāgotamī. There is no timeline for grief, no moment when you should be over it. You will carry this love, this loss, for the rest of your life. But the weight will shift, the sharpness will soften, and one day you will wake up and realize that you're still here, still breathing, and somehow still finding moments of beauty, of meaning, of yes, even joy. That's not betrayal. That's not forgetting. That's healing. That's honoring the love by continuing to live. Rest now, dear one. You have walked a long way today, through grief, through pain, through the vast landscape of loss, and you have arrived here, in this moment, safe, held, not alone. May you sleep peacefully. May your dreams be gentle. May you wake with a heart just a little lighter, knowing that you are part of something eternal, that your love is never wasted, that your grief is simply proof that you dared to care deeply. May you remember Kisāgotamī, who lost everything and found the path to freedom. Not freedom from pain, but freedom within pain, the ability to hold all of it, the love, the loss, the beauty, the sorrow. May you find that same freedom, that same peace, that same vast, open heart that can hold everything without breaking. Rest well, dear heart. Your loved ones, wherever they are, would want you to rest, to heal, to live, to love again. Kisāgotamī learned that grief is universal, that loss connects us to every human heart, and in that recognition, she found peace. But sometimes, loss comes not as one death, but as many. Not as one moment, but as a cascade of tragedies that seem impossible to survive. What happens when everything, every single thing you love, is taken in the span of a single day? How does the heart continue when it has been shattered so completely? There seem to be no pieces left to gather. Let me share with you another story of grief. A story that asks even more of us. A story of a woman named Pāli, who lost not just one child, but everything. And yet, even she, after losing everything, found a way to peace. Listen, as we journey deeper into the Buddha's teachings on surviving the unsurvivable. In the city of Savatthi, during the time of the Buddha, there lived a young woman named Pāli. She was born into a wealthy merchant family, the kind of household where abundance was simply the air they breathed. Her childhood was filled with silk garments, fragrant gardens, and the constant attention of servants who anticipated her every need. Her parents doted on her, their only daughter, precious beyond measure. As Pāli grew into a young woman, her beauty became renowned throughout the city. Suitors from prominent families sent gifts, hoping to win her father's approval. Her future seemed assured, a good marriage, a comfortable life, the continuation of prosperity and ease. But Pāli's heart had other plans. In her father's household there worked a young servant, strong and kind, with eyes that saw her not as a merchant's daughter, but as herself, simply herself. They fell in love, the kind of love that obliterates social boundaries, that makes impossible choices seem inevitable, that whispers, nothing else matters but this. When Pāli told this young man that her parents were arranging her marriage to a merchant's son, something broke open in both their hearts. The thought of being separated was unbearable. So one night, under a moon thin as a whisper, they fled. Together, they left behind the mansion, the security, the comfort, everything that had defined Pāli's life until that moment. They traveled to a distant village, far from her father's reach. There, they built a small hut, simple, barely more than a shelter. The man worked in the fields. Pāli learned to cook over a fire, to carry water, to live with calloused hands and an aching back. But they were happy. It was enough. They had each other, and soon they had more. Pāli discovered she was with child. The pregnancy brought joy, mixed with a bittersweet longing. As her belly grew round, Pāli thought often of her mother, how she wished to reconcile, to share this news, to have her family know their grandchild. When the time of birth drew near, Pāli felt a powerful pull toward home. She begged her husband, "Please, let us go back. Let me give birth in my mother's house. They'll forgive us when they see our child." Her husband was afraid. He remembered the merchant's rage when they discovered the elopement. "Not yet," he said. "Not yet. It's too soon. They need more time." But as the birth pains began, fear gripped Pāli's heart. She couldn't bear this alone. in a hut, with no women to help her, no mother to hold her hand. So she set out. Without her husband's knowledge, she began the journey back to Savatthi. When he discovered she was gone, the young man raced after her. He caught up when she was already far along the road, too far to turn back. The pains were coming faster now. There, beside the road, under the open sky, with only her frightened husband to help, Pata'ara gave birth to their first son. They named him there, in the grass, beneath the stars. And when Patakara was strong enough to walk, they returned to their village. The journey home forgotten, the danger past. A family, now of 3. 2 years passed. Their son grew strong and curious, always reaching for his father's hand, always laughing at the birds and butterflies that visited their small garden. And then, Patakara was pregnant again. This time, the longing for her mother was even stronger. She watched her little boy playing and thought, "My mother doesn't even know she has a grandson. My father doesn't know his lineage continues." As her time drew near, Patakara made up her mind. "I'm going home. I need my mother for this birth. Please, come with me. Surely enough time has passed. Surely they'll forgive us when they see their grandson." Her husband still hesitated, but seeing the determination in his wife's eyes and remembering her last solitary attempt, he agreed. They would go together. The whole family would make this journey to Savatthi. They set out in the morning, their son riding on his father's shoulders, chattering about everything he saw. Patahara walking slowly, carefully, her hand on her belly, feeling the second child moving within. It was the rainy season. The sky had been threatening all morning, heavy clouds the color of deep bruises, piling up on the horizon. By midday, the rain began. Not the gentle rain that nourishes crops, but the violent rain of monsoon fury, rain that falls like rivers falling from the sky. They sought shelter under a large tree, huddled together. The father wrapping his body around his son, Patahara pressed close, trying to stay warm. And there, beneath that tree, as lightning split the sky and thunder shook the earth, Patakara's second child decided to be born. The pain, the fear, the cold, the rain, mixing with tears, with blood, with the primal sound of birth. There was no gentleness in this, only survival. Their second son was born into that storm, wet and wailing, held close to his mother's chest while rain poured down upon them all. When the storm finally passed, they were exhausted, soaked, shivering, but alive, all alive. 2 sons now, a family of 4. "We can't go on today," the husband said. "You need to rest, to recover. I'll build a shelter here. We'll stay the night and continue in the morning." He left them sitting beneath the tree, Patakara nursing the newborn, the older boy curled against her side. The father went searching for materials to build a simple lean-to, just enough to keep them dry through the night. Patakara sat in that strange stillness after a storm, everything dripping, the air heavy with moisture, her body aching from birth, her heart full of fierce love for these 2 small beings depending entirely on her. She waited for her husband to return. The sun began to set, shadows grew long. The older boy started to whimper. "Hungry, Mama, hungry. Soon," she whispered. "Papa will come back soon with shelter, then we'll rest and eat." But he didn't come. The light faded, darkness fell, thick and complete. Still, no sound of her husband returning. Patahara began to call, his name echoing through the forest, again and again. Only silence answered, only the drip of water from leaves, only the distant cry of a night bird. When dawn finally came, Patahara wrapped the newborn against her chest. took the hand of her older son, and went searching for her husband. She found him not far from where she'd waited. He was lying still, so still, his body peaceful, as if sleeping. But he wasn't sleeping. During the storm, a snake disturbed from its hiding place had bitten him. The venom had worked quickly. He had died, alone, trying to build shelter for his family. Patakara stood there, her hand still holding her living son's hand, her newborn still nursing at her breast, looking down at her husband's body, and something in her mind began to crack. What do you do when the person who shared your life, your struggles, your love, is suddenly just a body, lying still in the grass? Patakara couldn't bury him. She had no tools. She couldn't stay. She had 2 small children who needed food, shelter, care. So she did the only thing she could do. She kept walking toward Sāvatthi, toward her parents' home. Now, more than ever, she needed her family. The older boy didn't understand. He kept asking, "Where, Papa? Want Papa?" And Patachara didn't know how to explain death to a 2-year-old. So she just kept walking, kept saying, "Soon, we'll be safe." Soon, they reached a river, swollen from the rains, the water rushing past, brown and churning with debris. But it was the only way across, the only path to Sāvatthi and safety. Patakara looked at that river. She looked at her 2 sons, the newborn, so tiny, so fragile. The older boy, tired, frightened, confused. She made a decision. "I'll take the baby across first. Leave him on the far bank, then come back for you, my strong boy. Can you wait here? Just for a moment? Mama will come right back." The little boy nodded. He was always so good, so trusting. Patachara waded into that river, the current pulling at her legs, her waist, the water cold and powerful. But she held the newborn high above the surface, protecting him and keeping him safe. She reached the far bank, placed the baby gently on the grass. "I'll be right back," she whispered, even though he couldn't understand. Just one moment. She turned and plunged back into the river, swimming, fighting the current, focused only on getting back to her older son. But as she reached the middle of that river, something happened. A hawk, high above, hunting, saw something on the far bank, something small and moving. The bird dove, silent and swift as death. Patara was still in the water when she heard it, the sound a mother never forgets, the cry of her child in terror. She turned and saw the hawk, rising, with something in its talons. She screamed, a sound that wasn't quite human, a sound that came from somewhere deeper than her throat. She tried to swim faster to reach the bank, but the current held her back. She could only watch as the hawk carried her newborn son away into the sky, until it was just a speck, and then nothing. For a moment, Patara forgot to move, forgot to breathe. The river kept flowing around her, indifferent to her anguish. Then she remembered her older son, still waiting on the other bank. She turned and swam back, every stroke a prayer. Please, please, let him be safe. Not both, my children. She reached the bank where she'd left him. "Mama's here," she called. "Mama's back." But there was only silence. She climbed onto the shore, looking, searching. "Where are you? Come out. It's safe now." Nothing. No sound of little feet running toward her. No voice calling, "Mama." She found his footprints in the mud, leading to the water's edge, and then vanishing. He must have seen her struggling in the current, must have thought she needed help. This brave, trusting boy had tried to come to her, had stepped into that river, and the current that she, as an adult, had barely been able to fight, had taken him, swept him away, downstream, gone. Patahara stood there, on that riverbank, her arms empty, both her children gone, her husband dead, everything, every single thing she loved, taken in the span of one night. And one morning, there's a place the mind goes when loss is too great to comprehend, a place beyond tears, beyond thought, a place of numbness so complete it almost feels like peace. Patahara walked the rest of the way to Savatthi alone. She didn't remember walking. She was simply there, standing in the streets of her childhood city, asking for directions to her father's house. People stared at her, her clothes torn and muddy, her hair wild, her eyes looking at nothing and everything. But she didn't notice. She just walked, placing one foot in front of the other, moving toward the place that meant safety, family, home. She found the house, the large, familiar gates, the walls she'd known since birth. She knocked, her hands trembling, finally trembling. Now that she was almost safe, a servant opened the gate, looked at her, confused, not recognizing this ragged woman as the merchant's daughter. "I need," Patahara's voice cracked. "I need to see my father. Please. I'm his daughter. I've come home." The servant's face changed. Shock and something else. Something that looked like pity, or perhaps fear. "Wait here," the servant whispered and disappeared inside. Patahara waited. Soon, she thought. Soon I'll see my mother's face. I'll tell them everything. They'll hold me. They'll help me understand how to keep living after this. But when the servant returned, he wasn't smiling. He wasn't opening the gate wider to let her in. "Miss," he said softly, "I don't know how to tell you this, but 3 days ago, there was a fire. The house, it collapsed. Your father, your mother, your brother, they were all inside." The servant kept talking, explaining about the cremation that had happened that very morning, about how the whole city had mourned, about how if only she had come one day earlier. But Patahara wasn't hearing the words anymore. She was somewhere else, somewhere beyond the reach of language. Her husband, dead. Her newborn son, taken by a hawk. Her older son, drowned. Her parents and brother, burned alive. Every connection to life, every person she loved, every reason to keep existing, gone. People say that Patahara went mad that day, that she wandered the streets of Savatthi, pulling at her hair, her clothes falling away, speaking to people who weren't there, calling for her children, for her husband, for her mother. The mind has a mercy built into it. When reality becomes unbearable, it simply refuses to accept it. It retreats into a space where the unbearable hasn't happened yet. For days, Patahara wandered. Children threw stones at her. Dogs barked and chased her. People called her the mad woman and hurried past, avoiding her eyes. Until one day, her wandering brought her to a grove at the edge of the city, a quiet place, where a man sat beneath a tree, surrounded by monks in saffron robes, speaking in a voice so calm, it seemed to come from another world, a world where perhaps peace was still possible. It was the Buddha. When the Buddha saw Patahara approaching, wild-haired and ragged, speaking to people only she could see, some of the monks moved to stop her, to send away this disturbing presence. But the Buddha raised his hand. "Let her come," he said quietly. There was something in his voice, something that cut through even Patahara's madness. She stopped her frantic movements. She looked at this man, sitting so still, so present, so unafraid of her chaos. "Come," the Buddha said again. "Come and be at peace." And just those words, just that invitation, cracked something open in Patachara's frozen heart. She fell to her knees before him and began to weep. Finally, to weep. All the tears she hadn't been able to shed at the river, or the gate, or in the streets, came flooding out. Great, racking sobs that shook her entire body. The Buddha sat quietly, letting her cry, not trying to stop the tears, not offering false comfort, just present, witnessing, holding space for all that grief. When the sobbing finally subsided into silence, Patachara looked up, her mind clearing for the first time in days, seeing where she was, who she was speaking to. "Lord," she whispered, her voice raw, "I have lost everything. My husband, my children, my parents, everyone I loved is gone. How do I bear this? How do I keep living when everyone I lived for has been taken away?" The Buddha looked at her with infinite compassion. "Patahara," he said, "do you see this grief you carry? This unbearable weight?" "Yes," she whispered. "In this life," the Buddha continued, "you have shed tears for your lost husband and your lost children, but in your countless lives before this one, you have shed enough tears of grief to fill all the oceans of the world." Patachara blinked, trying to understand. "Grief," the Buddha said gently, "is not unique to you. It is not a punishment. It is not evidence that you have failed, or that life has singled you out for suffering." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Grief is the price we pay for love. In a world where everything changes, everything that arises passes away. Every meeting leads to parting. Every life ends in death. This is not cruelty. It is simply the nature of existence." Patahara felt something shifting in her understanding. A space opening where there had been only crushing weight. "The suffering," the Buddha continued, "comes not from the loss itself, but from our belief that it shouldn't have happened, from our desperate wish to turn back time, to change reality, to make impermanent things permanent." "But," Patahara whispered, "my children, they were so small, they had their whole lives ahead of them. It's not fair." "No," the Buddha agreed, "it's not fair. Life is not fair. Life is not unfair. Life simply is. And within it, all things arise and pass in their own time, which is never the time we would choose." He looked at her with such gentleness. "Tell me, Patachara, if I asked you to search throughout this city and bring me one family that has never known grief, one household where death has never visited, could you find such a place?" Patahara thought about all the houses she'd passed in her wandering. She thought about her own childhood home, now burned and empty. She thought about the faces of the people who'd avoided her eyes in the streets. "No," she said slowly, "I couldn't find such a place. Everyone has lost someone." "Yes," the Buddha said, "this is the first noble truth. Life in this world includes suffering, includes loss, includes the grief of separation from what we love. This truth doesn't make the pain less, but it makes the pain less lonely." Patachara sat very still. Something was happening inside her. The unbearable isolation of her grief was shifting. She wasn't alone in a universe that had singled her out for cruelty. She was one human being, among billions, all experiencing this same truth of impermanence and loss. The question, the Buddha said softly, is not, "Why did this happen to me?" The question is, "What will I do with this pain?" Will I let it destroy me? Or will I let it become my greatest teacher? How? Patahara asked. How can this pain teach me anything except more pain? By stopping, the Buddha said, your fight against reality, by accepting fully that they are gone, that life has changed irrevocably, and that you must change with it, or be broken by the refusal to change. He continued, grief is not your enemy. Grief is love, with nowhere to go. The love you feel for your children, for your husband, for your family. That love is real. It was real. It remains real, even though they are gone. But what do I do with that love? Patahara whispered. You transform it, the Buddha said, from personal love for specific people into universal love for all beings. Every mother who has lost a child, you can understand her. Every person facing loss, you can sit with them in their grief because you know this territory. Your suffering, he said, can become your gift. Your broken heart can become your open heart if you're willing to walk through the fire of this pain without turning away, without numbing, without pretending it's less than it is. Patahara sat, breathing, just breathing. For the first time since the storm, she felt something other than numbness or agony. She felt the possibility of continuing, not continuing the life she'd had. That life was over, irretrievably over, but continuing nonetheless, as someone new, someone forged in grief, someone who knew the depths of loss and had survived it. Will you, the Buddha asked gently, stay here and learn to live with what cannot be changed? Patahara looked up at this man who had somehow found her in her madness and called her back to herself. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will try. Patahara stayed in the Buddha's community. She became a nun, shaving her head, wearing the simple robes, learning to meditate, to sit with her mind and all its pain. It wasn't easy. There were days when the grief felt as fresh as if she'd just left that river. Days when she heard a child laugh and turned, expecting to see her son. But slowly, very slowly, she began to understand what the Buddha had taught her. The grief didn't go away, but her relationship to the grief began to change. She stopped fighting it. She stopped telling herself she shouldn't feel it. She stopped wishing she could go back and change the past. She began, instead, to turn toward the grief, to feel it fully, to let it wash through her like waves. Painful waves, yes, but waves that came and also went. One evening, Patahara was washing her feet after walking meditation. She poured water from a bowl. The first pour of water flowed far across the ground. The second pour flowed a shorter distance. The third pour barely moved at all before disappearing into the earth. She stood watching this. Such a simple thing, water, flowing and stopping, and suddenly, in that moment, everything the Buddha had taught her came together in a flash of understanding. The water flowing far, like her children's lives that might have been, flowing far into the future. The water flowing less far, like the life her husband had lived. Some distance, but not the distance they'd hoped. The water disappearing immediately, like her newborn, whose life had barely begun. All of it, just water, flowing according to causes and conditions. Not personal, not a punishment, just the nature of water and ground and gravity, just the nature of life and death and time. Patahara stood there, the bowl still in her hands, and felt something release, something she'd been holding for so long. She'd forgotten it was possible to let go. The resistance to what had happened, the story that it shouldn't have happened, the belief that if only she'd made different choices, her loved ones would still be alive. All of it released, like a fist that has been clenched so long it forgot it could open. She saw with perfect clarity. There was nothing she could have done differently. Every choice she'd made with love, with the best knowledge she had at that moment. The storm wasn't her fault. The river wasn't her fault. The hawk, the fire, the snake. None of it was personal. None of it was punishment. It was just life, unfolding in its mysterious, uncontrollable way. And she was still here, still breathing, still able to feel the evening air on her skin, the coolness of water on her feet, still alive. In a world that included both unbearable loss and the possibility of peace existing simultaneously, Patasara began to laugh and cry at the same time. The monks nearby looked concerned. Was she slipping back into madness? But no, this was different. This was the laughter of recognition, the tears of release. This was the sound of a heart breaking open into freedom. She went to the Buddha and told him what she'd understood. He smiled. Patasara, he said, you have seen the truth directly. You have stopped running from reality. You have stopped arguing with what is. This, he said, is the beginning of peace, not the peace of getting what we want, but the peace of accepting what is, and finding that even here, even in this, there is room to breathe, room to live, room to love again. Patahara bowed deeply. Teacher, she said, I have lost everything, but in losing everything, I have found something I didn't know existed. I've found freedom from the fear of loss. Because when you've lost everyone you love and survived it, when you've walked through the valley of the shadow of death and come out the other side, still breathing, you realize that grief cannot kill you, that loss cannot destroy the essence of who you are, that even in the absence of everything you thought you needed, life continues. And there's a strange peace in that, a liberation in having nothing left to lose. Patakara became one of the Buddha's most respected teachers, especially for those experiencing grief. She would sit with them, and they would see in her eyes that she knew. She had been where they were. She had survived the unsurvivable. And if she could find peace, perhaps they could too. She would tell them, your grief is not a problem to be solved, it's a process to be lived. It's love transforming into acceptance. And that transformation happens in its own time, not the time you wish it would. Don't rush it, she would say. Don't pretend you're fine when you're not. Don't smile when you need to cry. But also, don't believe that grief is all you are. You are also the one who breathes, who eats, who sees the sunset, who can still, in moments, feel joy. You are larger than your grief, even though, right now, the grief feels like it's everything. Years passed. Patakara taught and meditated and lived a life that honored those she'd lost. By refusing to let their deaths destroy her, she had transformed her suffering into wisdom, her brokenness into an open heart, her grief into compassion for all who suffer. And one day, sitting in meditation, Patahara realized she was completely at peace. Not because the past had changed, but because she had changed. She had accepted the unacceptable. She had carried the unbearable. She had survived what she thought would kill her. And in surviving, she had discovered something profound. That peace doesn't come from having a life free of loss. Peace comes from touching the place within yourself that remains untouched by loss. The place that was there before your loved ones were born. The place that will be there after they're gone. The place that holds everything, all the joy, all the sorrow, all the love, all the grief, and remains, somehow, at peace with all of it. This was Pattakara's gift. This was her teaching. Not that grief goes away, but that we are larger than our grief, and that even in the midst of devastating loss, life is still offering us the possibility of peace. And so, this is Pattakara's story. A story of loss so complete, it seems impossible to survive. And yet, she did survive. More than survive. She transformed. She became a teacher. She helped countless others find their way through grief. Perhaps you're listening tonight because you too have experienced loss. Maybe not as dramatic as Pattakara's, but loss nonetheless. The kind that changes the shape of your life. If so, this story is offered to you as a companion, a reminder that you're not alone, that grief is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of love, and love is never a mistake. The people you've lost, whether recently or long ago, they were real. The love was real. The loss is real. None of that needs to be diminished or rushed or fixed. But also, you are real, still here, still breathing, still capable of moments of peace, of joy, of connection. You are not only your grief, you are also the space that holds the grief. And that space is vast enough to hold both sorrow and peace, both missing them and continuing to live. As you drift towards sleep tonight, allow yourself to release just a little of the burden you've been carrying. You don't have to figure out how to live with loss tonight. You don't have to be strong, or brave, or positive. You just have to rest. Let your body be held by whatever supports you. Let your mind release its grip on trying to make sense of everything. Sometimes healing begins, not with understanding, but with simply allowing ourselves to rest, to stop fighting, to stop resisting, to stop trying to be anywhere other than right here. Your breath continues, inhaling, exhaling, this simple rhythm that has accompanied you through every moment of your life, the good and the unbearable. Your breath doesn't know about loss, it just breathes, in and out, faithful, constant, always returning to this moment, this one breath. Let that be enough for now. Just this breath, just this moment of rest. And if dreams come tonight, whether they bring comfort or sorrow, know that they too are just waves passing through. You are the ocean that holds the waves, deep, vast, capable of holding it all. Rest now. Let Pattakara's story remind you that survival is possible, that peace is possible, even here, even now, even after loss that seemed unsurvivable. You are still here, and that is enough. That is more than enough. Rest, breathe, let go, sleep, and may you wake with just a little more gentleness toward yourself, a little more space around the grief, a little more trust that you can carry what you've been given to carry. One breath at a time, one day at a time, one moment of peace at a time. Good night. Pattakara discovered that acceptance is not giving up, it's recognizing what is and finding a way to live with it. She learned to stop fighting reality, to stop arguing with what had already happened, and in that acceptance, she found freedom. But there's another kind of letting go, another teaching the Buddha offered about release and freedom. Sometimes we carry things that once saved us, things that served us well for a time, but now have become burdens, weighing us down. Relationships that have ended, identities that no longer fit, ways of being that protected us once, but now imprison us. How do we know when to hold on and when to let go? The Buddha told a simple story about a man and a raft, a teaching that has guided seekers for centuries. Let me share it with you. Now, one evening, the Buddha was teaching in the Jeta Grove near Savatthi. A large group of monks had gathered, some who had been practicing for years, others who were new to the path. They had been discussing among themselves a question that arises for every spiritual seeker at some point along the way. The question was this: we have learned so many teachings, we have practiced so many methods, we have studied the scriptures, followed the precepts, meditated for countless hours. But when do we know we're done? When can we stop? When is it safe to let go of all these practices? There was disagreement. Some monks felt that the teachings should be held forever, that they should never abandon what had brought them this far. Others felt confined by all the rules and practices. They sensed that true freedom might lie beyond the very methods that had brought them toward freedom. It was a paradox. The path that leads to liberation. Can that path itself become a prison? The Buddha had been listening to their debate. Now, he smiled and raised his hand for silence. "Let me," he said, "tell you a story." And this is the story the Buddha told. Imagine, the Buddha said, a man on a journey. He has been traveling for many days through dangerous country. He has narrowly escaped bandits, wild animals, terrible heat, and burning thirst. He is exhausted. Every step feels like it might be his last, but he continues, because he knows that somewhere ahead lies safety, a peaceful land where he can finally rest. And then he comes to a river, a wide river, with water rushing fast and dark. The near shore where he stands is dangerous, full of threats, but the far shore, he can see it in the distance, green and peaceful, safe. But how to cross? There is no bridge, no boat waiting. The current is too strong to simply swim across. If he tries, he will be swept away and drowned. So, what does this man do? He looks around and sees materials scattered along the shore, fallen branches, dry reeds, vines that could be twisted into rope, and he thinks, I will build a raft. It won't be beautiful, it won't be perfect, but it will be enough to carry me across this river to safety. So the man sets to work. He gathers the branches, he binds them together with vines. He works carefully, testing each knot, making sure his raft will hold together in the current. It takes hours. The sun moves across the sky. His hands become raw from the work. But finally, the raft is ready. Not elegant, not the kind of vessel you'd want to keep forever. Just functional, just enough. The man pushes his raft into the water, climbs aboard, lies flat, holding on as the current grabs him and pulls him into the middle of that wide river. It's terrifying. The water is cold. The current keeps trying to flip him, to tear the raft apart. He holds on with all his strength, but the raft holds. The simple branches and vines do their work. They keep him afloat. They keep him moving toward the far shore. And finally, after what feels like forever, the man feels the raft scrape against the bottom. He has reached shallow water. The far shore is just ahead. He climbs off the raft, his legs shaking. He staggers forward and collapses on the green grass of the safe far shore. He is alive. He has made it. The raft saved his life. He lies there, breathing, feeling the solid earth beneath him, feeling safe for the first time in so long. And then the question arises in his mind, what should I do with the raft? The Buddha paused in his storytelling. He looked around at the monks. What do you think? He asked. What should the man do with the raft that saved his life? One monk spoke up. Teacher, he should be grateful to the raft. It saved him. He should honor it. Yes, the Buddha nodded. But how should he honor it? Another monk said, perhaps he should keep it safely on the shore, in case he ever needs to cross that river again. The Buddha smiled. A reasonable thought. But tell me, now that this man is on the safe shore, why would he ever need to cross back to the dangerous side? The monks were quiet, thinking. Let me, the Buddha said, tell you what the man in my story thought. He looked at the raft lying on the shore, the raft that had carried him to safety, and he thought, this raft served me well. I am grateful to it. But now I am on the far shore. I want to continue my journey inland, toward the peaceful country I seek. If I carry this raft with me, if I hoist it onto my shoulders and carry it across the land, it will slow me down. It will burden me. The very thing that saved me in the water would become a hindrance on land. So, what is the wise thing to do? The Buddha looked at his students. The wise thing, he said, is to honor the raft by letting it go, to leave it on the shore where it might perhaps help another traveler someday, and to continue the journey, unburdened by what is no longer needed. The monks sat in silence. Understanding was beginning to dawn. Like light slowly filling a dark room, the Buddha continued. The raft, he said, represents the teachings, the practices, the methods I have given you, the precepts, the meditation techniques, the scriptures, the rules of conduct. All of these are like the raft. They are skillful means to help you cross the river of suffering, to reach the far shore of peace and liberation. But, and here the Buddha's voice became very gentle, if you cling to these teachings, if you become attached to the methods, if you carry them as burdens instead of using them as tools, then you have missed the point entirely. One of the older monks looked troubled. But teacher, he said, are you saying we should abandon the teachings, stop practicing? How can that be right? The Buddha shook his head. I'm not saying to abandon the teachings while you're still in the river. That would be foolish. If you're in the middle of the current, if suffering is still pulling you under, then yes, hold tight to the raft. Use the practices. Let them support you. But, he continued, there comes a point for some practitioners when they reach the far shore, when they have crossed over, when they have seen through the illusion of suffering and touched true peace. And at that point, continuing to cling to the methods is like carrying the raft on land. It's unnecessary. It's burdensome. It shows a fundamental misunderstanding of what the methods were for. Another monk spoke up. So how do we know when we've reached the far shore? How do we know when it's safe to let go? The Buddha smiled. You'll know, he said, when you no longer need to ask, when peace is not something you achieve through practice, but something you recognize as your natural state, when you can be with whatever arises, pleasant or unpleasant, without needing to control it, fix it, or escape it. That's the far shore, when you're no longer using the teachings as a way to become something different, but simply as a way to be fully with what is. You're approaching the far shore. He paused, letting the teachings sink in. But, he added, even if you haven't fully reached the far shore yet, this teaching about the raft is still useful, because it reminds you not to become attached to the method itself. The method is not the goal. The finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. The menu is not the meal. The raft is not the far shore. A young monk who had been listening intently said, Teacher, I think I understand about the teachings, but what about other things we hold on to? Not spiritual practices, but ordinary things, relationships, identities, possessions. The Buddha's eyes brightened. Ah, he said, now you're seeing the deeper application. Yes, the teaching of the raft applies to everything we cling to. He settled back and continued. Think about a relationship. Perhaps it served you well for many years. That person helped you grow. They supported you. They loved you. But things change. People change. Sometimes a relationship that once nourished you becomes stagnant or even harmful. But still you hold on, because it saved you once, because you're grateful, because you're afraid of what comes next. This, the Buddha said, is like carrying the raft on land. You're honoring the past, but you're burdening the present and limiting the future. Or consider, he went on, an identity, a role you've played. Perhaps you were the successful one, or the caretaker, or the rebel, or the good child. That identity helped you navigate your early life. It was your raft across difficult waters. But now you've changed. That identity no longer fits. It's become a cage instead of a vehicle. But still you cling, because it's familiar, because people expect it, because without it, who are you? This, the Buddha said, is carrying the raft. This is honoring the past by sacrificing the present. The monks sat quietly. Many were thinking about their own rafts. What were they carrying that they no longer needed? What had saved them once, but now was weighing them down? So, one monk finally asked, how do we practice this letting go? It sounds simple, but when I try to release something, I find my hand just closes tighter. The Buddha nodded. Yes, he said, letting go is perhaps the most misunderstood teaching. People think it means pushing away, or not caring, or becoming cold and detached. But, he continued, true letting go is none of those things. Letting go is not rejection, it's acceptance. It's making peace with change. He looked around at all the faces. Let me offer you a practice, he said, a way to work with letting go. First, the Buddha said, notice what you're holding on to. Become aware of the grasping itself. Maybe it's a thought you keep thinking, a resentment towards someone who wronged you, a story about yourself that no longer serves. Just notice it. Don't judge it. Don't make it wrong. Just see it clearly. Ah, I'm holding this. I'm gripping this. I'm carrying this like a raft on land. Second, he continued, ask yourself, is this serving me now? Not did it serve me in the past, but right now, in this moment. Does carrying this help me? Or is it weighing me down? Be honest. Sometimes we discover that, yes, this thing still serves us. We're still in the river. We still need the raft. And that's fine. Keep it. Use it. But often, the Buddha said, we discover that we're holding on out of habit, out of fear, out of a story we're telling, about loyalty or responsibility or who we should be. Third, he said, when you recognize that something is no longer serving you, practice gratitude. Thank it for what it gave you. Honor the role it played in bringing you to where you are. The relationship that's ending, thank it for the love you shared, for the lessons you learned, the identity you're outgrowing. Thank it for protecting you when you needed protection. The spiritual practice you're releasing, thank it for being the raft that carried you across the waters. And fourth, the Buddha said, release, not by pushing away, but by simply opening your hand. Imagine you're holding a bird. If you squeeze it, you'll hurt it. If you throw it, you'll hurt it. But if you simply open your hand and allow it to fly, that's letting go. Stop holding. Stop controlling. Stop trying to keep things as they were. Just open your hand and allow change to happen. The Buddha paused. This, he said, is how you work with the teaching of the raft. Not by forcefully abandoning everything, not by becoming cold and detached, but by developing wisdom about what to hold and what to release and when. One of the youngest monks raised his hand. Teacher, he said, his voice tentative, what if we let go of something and then we regret it? What if we realize we actually still needed it. The Buddha smiled warmly. Then, he said, you learn. You recognize that you're learning to discern, and discernment comes through experience, including mistakes. Besides, he added, if you truly needed it, if you let go too soon, then you'll find yourself back in the river, and you'll know to build another raft or hold on to the one you have more carefully. The point, the Buddha said, is not to never make mistakes. The point is to stay awake, stay aware, keep checking. Is this serving me? Am I on the raft in the water, or am I carrying the raft on land? And, he continued, to remember always that everything is impermanent. The raft will eventually decay. The relationship will eventually change. The identity will eventually become irrelevant. This is not sad. This is not a problem. This is just the nature of reality. Suffering comes from pretending that impermanent things are permanent, from trying to hold still what is naturally flowing, from building your home on a raft in the middle of the river, instead of using the raft to reach the shore. The Buddha looked around at all the monks. Some were nodding slowly. Some had tears in their eyes. Some sat very still, absorbing the teaching into their bones. So, the Buddha said, I offer you this teaching of the raft, not to make you abandon the path, but to help you walk it wisely. Use the methods gratefully. Release them when they've served their purpose. And always remember, the teachings are pointing you toward freedom. They are not themselves the freedom you seek. The raft, he said, is to be used, honored, and ultimately left behind. This applies to every practice, every technique, every method I have taught you. And, he added, with a gentle smile, it applies to me as well. I am also a raft. Don't cling to me. Learn from me, yes, but don't make me into something you must carry forever. The goal, the Buddha said, is not to become my follower forever. The goal is for you to become fully yourself, awake, free, walking your own path with wisdom and compassion. And when that happens, you won't need me anymore. And that, he said, will be my greatest joy. After the Buddha finished teaching, the monks sat in meditation, each one contemplating their own rafts. What were they holding that they no longer needed? One monk realized he had been clinging to anger toward his father, who had disowned him when he became a monk. That anger had fueled him for years. It had been his raft, giving him strength to prove he'd made the right choice. But now, years later, he was at peace with his decision. He no longer needed to prove anything. The anger was just weight he was carrying. A raft on land. He sat and thanked the anger for protecting him, for giving him strength when he needed it. And then he imagined opening his hand, letting the anger fly away, like a bird released. He felt lighter, immediately lighter. Another monk recognized that he'd been holding on to an identity as the strict one, the monk who never bent the rules, who was always serious, always disciplined. That identity had served him when he first ordained, when he was surrounded by distractions and temptations. It had been his raft, his way of staying on the path, but now it had become a prison. He couldn't laugh. He couldn't be spontaneous. He couldn't relax, because that wouldn't fit the identity he'd built. He realized he was carrying the raft, and his shoulders were tired. He sat and thanked the identity for serving him, and then he imagined setting it down on the shore, walking away from it, seeing who he might be without it. A younger monk realized he was clinging to a relationship with another monk. They had been close friends, supporting each other through the early days of practice. But recently, his friend had changed, had become critical, judgmental. The friendship had become draining instead of nourishing. But still he held on, because they'd been through so much together, because he felt loyal. He saw clearly. He was carrying the raft, honoring what the friendship had been. By refusing to see what it had become, he sat with this. It was painful, but also clarifying. He could be grateful for what the friendship had given him, and also acknowledge it was time to let it evolve or end. He didn't have to be angry. He didn't have to make his friend wrong. He just had to stop carrying something that was weighing him down. As the monks sat with their personal discoveries, the Buddha watched them with compassion. He knew this teaching would unfold differently for each one. Some would let go quickly. Others would need years to release their rafts. Some would let go of the wrong things too soon and have to learn from that. But all of them were practicing the essential skill of wisdom, discernment, the ability to see clearly what serves and what doesn't, what to hold and what to release. This, the Buddha knew, was the practice that would serve them for the rest of their lives. And now, this teaching comes to you, 25 centuries later, in a completely different world. But the question remains the same. What are you carrying that you no longer need? What served you once, but now has become a burden? Maybe it's a relationship that you keep trying to revive, even though it's clear it's over. You keep thinking, but it was so good once. We were so happy. Maybe if I just try harder. And you're carrying the raft, honoring the past, by sacrificing your present. Or maybe it's a career, an identity. You worked so hard to become this person, the lawyer, the doctor, the artist, the parent. It defined you for so long, but now it doesn't fit. You've changed. You want something different, but you can't imagine letting go of this thing you worked so hard to build. You're carrying the raft, and your back is breaking under the weight. Or maybe it's a belief about yourself. I'm not good enough. I'm broken. I'm unlovable. That belief formed when you were young. Perhaps it protected you in some way. Perhaps it explained your suffering, gave you something to fight against. But now it's just holding you back. It's not protecting you anymore. It's limiting you. You're carrying the raft. Or maybe it's a way of being. You've always been the strong one, the one who helps everyone else, who never needs help, who never shows weakness. That way of being got you through hard times. It was your raft. But now, it's keeping you from receiving, from being vulnerable, from letting people truly see you and love you. You're carrying the raft, and you're so tired. The Buddha's teaching tonight is simple. You can put it down. You can honor it, thank it, and put it down. Not by pushing it away. Not by being angry at yourself for carrying it this long. Not by making yourself wrong, but by simply recognizing, this served me. I'm grateful, and it's time to continue without it. Just like the man in the story. You've crossed the river, or maybe you're on the shore now. The dangerous waters are behind you. You're safe now. You're different now. And the thing that brought you here doesn't need to come with you into what's next. As you lie here tonight, in the darkness, feeling your body heavy and still, I invite you to consider, what are you ready to release? Not what should you release, not what someone else thinks you should let go of, but what is your heart ready to set down? Maybe you already know. Maybe it's been clear for a while, and you've just been afraid to admit it. Or maybe you don't know yet. Maybe this teaching will work on you in dreams, in the days to come, and you'll suddenly see, oh, that's my raft. That's what I've been carrying. However it happens for you, trust the process. Trust your own wisdom. You know, you might not think you know, but somewhere deep down, you know what's weighing you down, and you know you're allowed to set it down. The Buddha said, Don't carry the raft on land. He also said, be grateful to the raft. It saved your life. Both are true. Gratitude and release go together. You can honor what something was and still let it go. You can love someone and still leave. You can appreciate who you were and still become someone new. You can thank the method that brought you here and still walk forward without it. This is not betrayal. This is not giving up. This is wisdom. This is the natural flow of life. Everything has its season. It's time to be picked up. It's time to be set down. Right now, in this moment, you're not carrying anything. Your body is lying down. Your hands are open and empty. You're not holding your identity, or your past, or your story about who you should be. You're just breathing, just being, just here. This is what it feels like to not carry the raft. This simplicity, this ease, this presence. You can access this anytime. You don't have to wait until everything in your life is resolved. You can set down the raft for just this moment, this breath, and feel what it's like to be unburdened. And maybe tomorrow you pick it back up. Maybe you're not ready to release it fully yet. That's okay. That's perfect. But at least now you know what it feels like to set it down. You know that release is possible, that you're allowed, that it's not betrayal, it's freedom. And so, the Buddha's teaching about the raft comes to an end. A simple story about a man crossing a river, and a profound truth about how we live our lives. We collect rafts throughout our lives. Methods, relationships, identities, beliefs, all designed to help us navigate the waters of existence. And sometimes we forget that they're just rafts. We think they're us. We think we can't survive without them. We think letting go would be losing ourselves. But the Buddha reminds us, you are not the raft. You are the one who uses the raft, and you are also the one who, eventually, sets it down and continues the journey. As you drift into sleep tonight, let this teaching work on you. Let it gently loosen the grip you've been holding on whatever you've been carrying. You don't have to figure it all out tonight. You don't have to suddenly let go of everything. That's not how healing works. But maybe, just maybe, you can relax your grip, just slightly, just enough to feel a little more space, a little more ease. Your breath continues on its own. It doesn't need you to carry it. It just breathes, inhaling, exhaling, simple, natural, effortless. What if your life could be a little more like that? What if you could trust the flow a little more? Carry a little less control, a little less. What if the raft that brought you here has done its job, and now it's time to walk on solid ground, feeling the earth beneath your feet, unburdened, free? These are not questions to answer. They're invitations to rest into, to feel into, to let work on you while you sleep. Let your body sink deeper into whatever supports you. Let your mind release its hold on the day, on the worries, on the planning, on the remembering. Just this, just breath, just rest, just the gentle letting go that happens naturally as you drift towards sleep. And if dreams come, let them come. They might show you the rafts you carry. They might show you what you're ready to release. Trust them. Trust yourself. You are wiser than you think, deeper than you know, more capable of change than you've imagined. The man in the story built a raft, crossed a river, and set it down. 3 simple actions: build, use, release. You have built so much in your life. You have used so many tools, methods, relationships to bring you to this moment. And now, perhaps, It's time for the third step. Release. Not all at once, not perfectly, just gently, gradually, one raft at a time, one breath at a time. Rest now. Let the teaching work. Let your deep wisdom guide you. Let tomorrow take care of tomorrow. Tonight, you're just here, just breathing, just resting, just being. The vast, spacious awareness that can hold everything and also release everything. You are not what you carry. You are the one who carries and the one who, finally, freely, sets it down. Good night. Sleep deeply, wake gently, and may you find yourself just a little lighter. The teaching of the raft reminds us that letting go is not betrayal, it's wisdom. It's honoring what was, while allowing what's next to emerge. We release the methods that brought us here, so we can walk forward unburdened. But what do we carry forward? What's the quality of heart that sustains us through all the changes, all the losses, all the letting go? The Buddha taught that the one thing worth cultivating above all else is compassion. Not as a technique, not as another practice to master, but as a way of being, a natural radiance of the open heart. Compassion for yourself when you stumble, compassion for others when they disappoint, compassion for all beings struggling to find happiness in this difficult world. Let me share with you the Buddha's profound teaching on metta, on loving kindness, the practice that transforms the heart, from closed to open, from defended to free. One day, the Buddha was speaking with his monks. They had been practicing meditation in the forest, seeking peaceful places where they could develop concentration and wisdom. But some of the monks were struggling. They had found a beautiful grove, quiet and secluded, perfect for practice. But at night, when they meditated, they felt disturbed. They heard strange sounds, felt presences around them. The local spirits who inhabited that grove were not welcoming these human intruders. The monks returned to the Buddha, discouraged. "Teacher," they said, "we cannot practice in that grove. The spirits there are hostile. They frighten us, disturb our peace. We need to find another place." The Buddha looked at them with gentle amusement. "You need," he said, "a different kind of protection. Not a new place, but a new practice. Return," he told them, "to that grove. But this time, go armed with the most powerful protection that exists." The monks looked confused. Protection? Should they carry weapons? Build stronger shelters? "No," the Buddha said, reading their thoughts. "The protection I'm giving you is not external. It's a practice of the heart, a meditation that will make you invulnerable, not because nothing can harm you, but because you will radiate such loving kindness that no being will want to harm you." And then the Buddha taught them the metta meditation, the practice of unconditional loving kindness. "This," he said, "is how you practice. Sit quietly, place your attention on your heart, and begin by wishing yourself well." The monks were surprised. "Ourselves?" they asked. "Shouldn't we wish others well? Isn't that more selfless?" The Buddha shook his head. "You cannot," he said. "Give to others what you don't have yourself. If your own heart is empty of kindness toward yourself, if you are constantly criticizing yourself, judging yourself, driving yourself, how can you offer genuine kindness to others? So," he continued, "you must begin with yourself. Not out of selfishness, but out of wisdom. You are included in the circle of beings worthy of love. You're not outside that circle." He taught them the phrases to use, simple words that would direct the heart toward kindness. "May I be safe. May I be healthy. May I be at ease. May I be happy." Repeat these phrases, the Buddha said, Slowly, feel them in your heart. Don't just say them with your mind. Let them resonate in your chest, where you feel emotion, where you feel care. And, he added, if you notice resistance, if you notice a voice that says, I don't deserve this, or this is selfish, or I'm not worthy, just notice that voice, thank it for sharing, and continue the practice anyway. Because, the Buddha said, that voice is not the truth. It's just old conditioning, old pain, old judgments you absorbed from others and made your own. The truth, he said, is that you, like every being, deserve safety, health, ease, and happiness. Not because you've earned it by being perfect, but because you exist, because you're alive, because you're a being with a heart that can feel pain and joy. The monks listened, some nodding, some looking uncomfortable. This was not the practice they'd expected. After, the Buddha continued, you have practiced directing loving kindness toward yourself for some time. You then expand the circle. Bring to mind someone you love, someone easy to feel kindness toward. Perhaps a good friend, a teacher, a family member who has supported you. Hold them in your heart, picture them, if you can, and direct the same phrases toward them. May you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be at ease, may you be happy. Feel the warmth in your chest as you wish them well. This is your heart opening. This is compassion flowing. Then, the Buddha said, expand further. Think of someone neutral, someone you neither love nor dislike. Perhaps someone you see regularly but don't really know. A shopkeeper, a neighbor you pass on the road. Wish them well too. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. May you be happy. This, the Buddha explained, trains the heart to see that even those we don't know well are worthy of kindness. They too want to be happy. They too struggle. They too deserve care. And then, his voice became softer. If you're ready, bring to mind someone difficult, someone who has hurt you, someone toward whom you feel anger, resentment, fear. You don't, he said quickly, seeing some monk's eyes widen. You don't need to feel affection for this person. You don't need to excuse what they did. This is not about condoning harmful actions, but, he continued, can you recognize that this person, too, is suffering? That they, too, want happiness but don't know how to find it? That they, too, are trapped in confusion, in pain? Can you wish them freedom from that? Not for their sake only, but for yours? Because holding hatred in your heart is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So, the Buddha said, you practice, may you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be at ease, may you be happy, and if you can't genuinely feel it. The practice is not about forcing feelings, it's about planting seeds in the heart, seeds that will grow in their own time. Finally, the Buddha said, you expand the practice to all beings, everywhere, in all directions, all humans, all animals, all beings, whether you know them or not, whether you can see them or not. May all beings be safe. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be at ease. May all beings be happy. When you practice this way, the Buddha concluded, your heart becomes like the sun, radiating warmth in all directions, not selectively, not conditionally, just radiating, because that's what the sun does. And when your heart is like this, he said, even the spirits in the forest will feel your benevolence. They will want to protect you, not harm you. Because everyone, even non-human beings, responds to genuine loving kindness. The monks bowed. They returned to the grove, and this time they practiced the metta meditation, just as the Buddha had taught, and the forest became peaceful. The spirits, felt the change in the monk's presence. No longer were they intruders radiating fear or judgment. Now they were beings radiating love. And the whole grove became a sanctuary. The monks in that forest began to notice changes, not just in the environment around them, but in themselves. One monk had been carrying guilt for years. Before ordaining, he had hurt someone he loved. A harsh word spoken in anger. A relationship broken because of his pride. For years, he had meditated on the teachings, trying to purify his mind. But the guilt remained, heavy in his chest, a constant reminder that he was not a good person. But now, practicing metta, starting with himself, saying, "May I be safe, may I be healthy, may I be at ease, may I be happy." At first it felt impossible. The voice in his head immediately countered, "You don't deserve it. Remember what you did." But he continued the practice, day after day, sitting in the forest, placing his hand on his heart, speaking these words of kindness to himself. Gradually, something began to shift. Not the past. The past remained unchanged. What he had done was still what he had done. But his relationship to that past began to change. He began to see that the person who had spoken those harsh words was someone in pain, someone who didn't know better at that time. He saw that holding himself in contempt for that moment wasn't helping anyone. It wasn't helping the person he'd hurt. It wasn't making him a better person. It was just adding more suffering to an already painful situation. And slowly, very slowly, he began to forgive himself. Not by saying, "What I did was okay," but by saying, "I'm allowed to be a person who has made mistakes and is still worthy of kindness." One day during practice, tears began to flow. Not tears of guilt anymore, but tears of release, of finally letting himself off the hook, of finally joining the human family, imperfect, flawed, and still allowed to be at peace. Another monk had been struggling with chronic illness. His body hurt most days. Meditation was often uncomfortable. He watched other monks, sitting easily for hours, and felt inadequate, frustrated, angry at his body for failing him. When he tried the metta practice, saying, "May I be healthy," it felt cruel, like a mockery. He wasn't healthy. Wishing didn't make it so. But one of the elder monks noticed his struggle and offered guidance. "The practice," the elder said, "is not about making your body perfect. It's about changing your relationship to your body. However it is. Try," the elder suggested, changing the phrases slightly. "May this body be at ease, as much as possible. May I live with this pain, with less suffering." The monk tried this new approach. Instead of wishing away the pain, he began to send kindness to his body, exactly as it was, hurting, limited, struggling. He imagined his awareness like warm light, touching each painful area, not trying to fix it, not resenting it, just acknowledging, "This hurts, and I'm here with you. I'm not abandoning you. I'm not at war with you." Something profound happened. The pain didn't disappear, but the suffering around the pain began to lessen. He stopped adding the second arrow of self-judgment and frustration to the first arrow of physical pain. His practice became deeper, more real, because it wasn't about achieving some perfect state. It was about being compassionate with what is, exactly as it is. A third monk realized that he had been using the practice to avoid someone. He had been skipping the step of directing metta toward someone difficult. There was a monk in the monastery who irritated him constantly. This monk was loud, disruptive, always talking when others wanted silence, always asking questions during teachings. The monk had been simply avoiding this person, staying away, feeling superior, judging him as not serious about the practice. But one day, the Buddha's words echoed in his mind. Holding hatred in your heart is like drinking poison. He realized the person he was hurting most with his judgment was himself. Every time he saw this monk, he felt irritation, tension, anger. He was poisoning his own peace. So, reluctantly, he tried the practice, bringing this difficult person to mind. At first, he couldn't say, "May you be happy." It felt false, so he started smaller. "May you be free from suffering that he could genuinely wish," because he recognized that someone who disrupts others is probably suffering themselves, probably anxious, or insecure, or lonely. He practiced this for weeks, and gradually, his heart began to soften. He began to see this monk differently, not as an annoyance, but as another human being, struggling, trying to connect, not knowing quite how. One day, the difficult monk made a joke during a meal. Usually, this monk would have felt irritated, but this time, he found himself smiling, genuinely smiling. The practice was working, not by changing the other person, but by changing his own heart, opening it, making room for someone he had previously excluded from his circle of compassion. These were the transformations happening in that forest grove. Individual hearts learning to be gentler with themselves, with their bodies, with difficult people, with life, exactly as it was. One evening, after the monks had been practicing metta for many months, the Buddha gave them a further teaching, a teaching that would deepen their understanding of what compassion truly means. He asked them, "Have any of you witnessed a mother with her only child?" Several monks nodded, remembering their own mothers or sisters with their children. "Notice," the Buddha said, "how a mother loves her child. She doesn't love conditionally. She doesn't say, 'I will love you if you're well behaved,' or 'I will love you if you make me proud.' She loves because the child exists. She would sacrifice anything for that child's safety and happiness. She would put her own body between the child and danger without hesitation. Her love," the Buddha said, "is not earned. It's not dependent on the child being perfect or even being good. It's unconditional." The monks sat quietly, feeling the truth of this. "This," the Buddha said, "is the quality of heart I want you to develop, not just toward one child, but toward all beings, everywhere. Imagine," he continued, "that every being you meet is like that mother's only child, precious, deserving of protection, worthy of love, simply because they exist. Someone's precious child, the person who hurt you with their words, someone's precious child, the person you see begging on the street, someone's precious child. And you," the Buddha said, looking directly at each monk, "you too are someone's precious child, even if your own mother couldn't show you that love, even if you never felt that in your childhood. The truth remains. You are precious. You are worthy of that fierce, protective, unconditional love." One of the younger monks raised his hand hesitantly. "Teacher," he said, "I want to feel that, but I don't. How do I develop something I've never felt?" The Buddha smiled with great tenderness. "You practice," he said. "You practice as if it's true, even before you feel it. You say the words, 'May I be happy,' even when a voice inside says, 'You don't deserve it.' You treat yourself with gentleness, even when you feel you should be harsh. You speak to yourself with kindness, even when you're used to self-criticism. And gradually," the Buddha said, "the heart learns. The heart is like a muscle. It grows stronger with practice. It learns new patterns and new ways of being. You may not have had a mother who loved you unconditionally, but you can become that mother to yourself. You can learn to hold yourself with that fierce, protective, unconditional love. Another monk asked, "But teacher, isn't there a danger in this? If we love ourselves unconditionally, won't we become complacent? Won't we stop trying to improve?" The Buddha shook his head. "No," he said, "that's a misunderstanding of what love does. True love doesn't make you complacent. It makes you want to grow, want to become your best self. Think again," he said, "of the mother with her child. Does she love the child conditionally? No. But does her love mean she never guides the child, never teaches the child, never corrects the child's behavior? Of course she does, but she does it from love, not from contempt. She says, 'That behavior hurts someone. Let's learn a better way.' She doesn't say, 'You're bad, you're wrong, you're unlovable.' This," the Buddha said, "is how you practice with yourself. You love yourself unconditionally, while also guiding yourself toward wisdom and kindness. You say, 'I made a mistake. That happens. I'm human. What can I learn from this?' You don't say, 'I'm terrible. I always mess up. I'm worthless. Can you see the difference?'" The monks nodded slowly. This was a subtle teaching, a balance between acceptance and growth, between loving what is and supporting what's emerging. The Buddha continued, "When you practice metta this way, something remarkable happens. You stop seeing yourself as the enemy. You stop being at war with yourself. And when you're not at war with yourself, you have so much more energy for everything else, for your practice, for helping others, for simply being present with life. So much of our energy," he said, "is consumed by self-judgment, by trying to be someone different, by resisting who we are. When you drop that war, when you make peace with yourself, everything becomes easier. Not because life becomes easier, but because you're not fighting yourself anymore, while also trying to live life." One of the eldest monks spoke up. He rarely spoke, but when he did, everyone listened. "Teacher," he said, "I have practiced for decades. I have disciplined my mind, controlled my desires, followed every rule precisely. But," he continued, his voice cracking slightly, "I have never felt at peace. I've always felt that I'm not good enough, not pure enough, not enlightened enough. Listening to this teaching, I realize I have been so harsh with myself, so unforgiving. I would never treat another person the way I treat myself in my own mind." The Buddha looked at this elder monk with such compassion. "Yes," he said softly, "this is the final prison from which we must escape, the prison of self-judgment. You can be perfect in your behavior, perfect in your discipline, but if your heart is hard toward yourself, if you're constantly criticizing, constantly finding yourself lacking, you're still suffering. You haven't found freedom, you've just built a very refined prison." The elder monk's eyes filled with tears. After all these years, someone finally understood, someone finally gave him permission to be gentle with himself. So, the Buddha said to all the monks, "I give you this practice, not as another discipline to master, not as another thing to be perfect at, but as a gift, a way of being with yourself that makes life more livable, more joyful, more free. Practice loving yourself the way a mother loves her only child, fiercely, unconditionally, completely. And then extend that love outward to one person, to all people, to all beings everywhere. And watch," he said, "what happens. Watch how the world changes, not because the world itself changes, but because your heart opens, and an open heart sees everything differently. As the monks continued their practice of metta, they began to notice something unexpected. The boundaries between self and other started to blur. One monk was practicing sending loving kindness to all beings. May all beings be safe. May all beings be healthy. And suddenly he realized, I am included in all beings. When I wish all beings happiness, I'm wishing myself happiness too. It sounds obvious, but for someone who had spent years trying to be selfless, trying to eliminate any concern for himself, this was revolutionary. He didn't have to separate himself from the circle of compassion. He wasn't outside the circle, looking in. He was part of all beings. This integration brought such relief. He had been trying so hard to not care about his own well-being, and it had made him tense, stressed, exhausted. But now, he could care for himself as part of caring for all. It wasn't selfish. It was inclusive. Another monk began to notice that when he practiced sending metta to someone difficult, his own heart felt lighter. The practice was helping him, more than it was helping the difficult person. He realized the Buddha was right. Holding resentment was like drinking poison, and letting go of resentment through the practice of metta was like setting down a heavy burden he'd been carrying for years. The difficult person hadn't changed. They might never change, but he had changed. He was no longer imprisoned by his anger toward them. This was freedom. The monks also began to practice metta informally throughout the day, not just in seated meditation, but while walking, while eating, while doing chores. They would see a fellow monk struggling with something and silently think, "May you be at ease." They would see an animal in the forest and think, "May you be safe." They would feel their own body aching and think, "May this body be comfortable as much as possible." The practice became a way of being, a background attitude of goodwill that colored everything they did, and the results were tangible. The monastery became more peaceful. Conflicts decreased. When disagreements arose, they were handled with more patience, more understanding. Because when you're practicing, wishing everyone well, it's harder to demonize someone in an argument. You might disagree with them, but you still want them to be happy. This changes everything. One day, a visitor came to the monastery, a wealthy merchant who was considering supporting the monks with donations. This merchant was known for being harsh, critical, impossible to please. Several monks were nervous about his visit. But one monk, the one who had been practicing metta most diligently, volunteered to show the merchant around. As they walked, the monk was silently practicing, "May you be happy. May you be at ease." The merchant started as expected, criticizing the buildings, the way the monks dressed, the schedule they kept. But the monk didn't become defensive. He just listened, nodded, kept silently wishing the merchant well, and something strange happened. The merchant began to soften. His voice became less harsh. He started asking questions instead of making pronouncements. By the end of the visit, the merchant was smiling. He made a generous donation, and before he left, he said to the monk, "I don't know what it is about you, but I feel peaceful when I'm around you. Thank you." The monk bowed. He hadn't done anything special. He had just held this person in his heart with kindness, and somehow that had been felt. This, the monks were learning, was the true power of metta. It wasn't magical thinking. It wasn't about changing others through the force of your wishes. It was about changing yourself, your own heart, your own presence, and that change rippling outward in ways both subtle and profound. The Buddha watched all of this with quiet satisfaction. His monks were learning not just the theory of compassion, but the living practice of it. They were learning that compassion begins with yourself, extends to those you love, includes those you find neutral, challenges you with those you find difficult, and ultimately embraces all beings without exception. This was the path of the open heart, and it was working. Years passed. The monks in the forest continued their practice, and the Buddha's teaching on metta spread to other monasteries, to lay practitioners, to people throughout the land. Each person found their own way of working with the practice. Some used the traditional phrases, "May I be safe," "May I be healthy," "May I be at ease," "May I be happy." Others adapted the phrases to fit their own needs, their own struggles. One woman who had survived violence found that "May I be safe" was the most important phrase. She would say it over and over, reminding her traumatized body that she was safe now, that the danger had passed. Gradually, her nervous system began to believe her. The constant vigilance began to ease. She could sleep more deeply, walk through the world with less fear. A man who had lost his child to illness found that "May I be at ease" was the phrase that helped most. He couldn't wish himself happiness. That felt impossible while grieving, but he could wish himself ease. He could wish for the grief to be just slightly more bearable, for moments of peace within the sorrow. And those moments came, not because the grief disappeared, but because he stopped resisting it. He stopped telling himself he should be over it. He stopped adding judgment to the already unbearable weight. An elderly person facing the end of life found comfort in extending metta to their own body. May you be comfortable. May you be at peace. May you feel loved as you prepare to let go. Speaking to the body that had carried them for so many years, thanking it, blessing it, as it slowly shut down. This brought such gentleness to the dying process. Instead of fighting, resisting, fearing, they were accompanying themselves with love. A young person struggling with identity, with feeling like they didn't fit anywhere, found power in the phrase, "May I be happy, just as I am," not "May I be happy when I change," or "when I become acceptable to others," but "just as I am, right now, with all my confusion, with all my difference, may I be happy anyway." This became a radical act of self-acceptance, a refusal to wait for permission from others, to be okay with themselves. The Buddha heard these stories as they filtered back to him. He was pleased. This was exactly what he'd hoped for. The practice wasn't rigid. It wasn't one size fits all. It was alive, adaptable, meeting each person where they were. One day, a monk asked him, "Teacher, are there wrong ways to practice metta? Can you do it incorrectly?" The Buddha thought for a moment. "Yes," he said, "there are some mistakes to avoid. First," he said, "don't use metta as a bypass. Don't use it to pretend everything's fine when it's not. If you're angry, acknowledge the anger first, then practice metta. Don't use metta to suppress genuine feelings. Second," he continued, "don't use metta to try to control others, to make them behave the way you want. Metta is not manipulation. It's not, 'I'll send you loving kindness, so you'll finally listen to me.' Metta," the Buddha said, "is unconditional. It doesn't have an agenda beyond the simple wish for well-being. Third," he said, "don't practice metta for everyone else and exclude yourself. Don't make yourself the exception to compassion. If you notice you can easily wish others well, But when it comes to yourself, you go blank or resistant. That's a sign. You need to spend more time practicing metta for yourself. And fourth, the Buddha said, don't expect instant results. The heart takes time to soften, especially if it's been hard for a long time. Be patient with yourself. Some days the practice will feel natural, other days it will feel forced or fake. Practice anyway. Trust the process. The monk nodded, absorbing this guidance. But, the Buddha added with a smile, the beautiful thing about metta is that it's very hard to do real harm with it. Even if you practice imperfectly, you're still training your heart toward kindness, and that is always beneficial. The Buddha's final teaching on metta came near the end of his life. He was elderly now, his body failing, but his mind clear as ever. He gathered his closest disciples and said, I want to tell you the ultimate fruit of metta practice, where it leads, if you continue faithfully for years. The disciples leaned in, listening carefully. When you first practice metta, the Buddha said, it's effortful. You're trying to generate feelings of kindness. You're repeating phrases, hoping to convince your heart to soften. This is good. This is necessary. This is the beginning. But, he continued, if you practice for years, something shifts. The practice becomes effortless. Metta stops being something you do and becomes something you are. Your default attitude toward all beings becomes one of goodwill. You don't have to work at it. It's just your natural state. And, the Buddha said, his eyes shining, when you reach that point, you discover something extraordinary. The boundaries you thought separated you from others, those boundaries dissolve. You see, he continued, we spend most of our lives feeling separate. I'm here, you're there. I'm me, you're you. We're distinct, divided. But, the Buddha said, that sense of separation is not ultimately real. It's a useful fiction for navigating the world, but it's not the deepest truth. The deepest truth, he said, is that we're all interconnected, all part of one vast web of life. What happens to you affects me. What happens to me affects you. We're not separate. We're interdependent. And when your heart opens fully through metta practice, you experience this directly. You feel others' joy as your joy. You feel others' suffering as your suffering. Not because you're imagining it, but because the boundaries have thinned. This, the Buddha said, is called Brahmavihara, the divine abiding, living with a heart so vast, it has no limits, no borders, no exclusions. When you abide in metta this way, several things happen. First, he said, you become unshakable, not because nothing bothers you, but because your sense of self is no longer confined to just this body, this personality. When something happens to you, it's just one ripple in a vast ocean, not nothing, but also not everything. Second, he continued, you become truly fearless, not because you deny danger, but because you're no longer clinging so tightly to survival. You're connected to something larger than just your individual life. Third, the Buddha said, you become a refuge for others. People feel safe around you. They feel seen. They feel loved. Even if you don't say anything, your presence itself communicates. You matter. You're welcome. You're not alone. And fourth, he said softly, you become free. Free from the prison of self-concern. Free from the endless anxiety of, am I okay? Am I enough? Am I safe? Those questions don't disappear entirely, but they're no longer the center of your existence. They're just thoughts passing through a much larger space. The disciples sat in silence, some understanding intellectually, some having glimpses of what the Buddha was describing, all feeling inspired to continue the practice. So, the Buddha concluded, I encourage you, practice metta, not just as a technique, but as a way of life. Begin with yourself. Extend to those you love. Include those you find neutral. Challenge yourself with those you find difficult. And ultimately, expand to all beings everywhere. Do this daily. Do this for years. And watch what happens to your heart. It will break open, not in pain, though sometimes that comes too, but break open in the sense of expanding beyond what you thought were its limits. And you'll discover, the Buddha said, his voice filled with warmth, that the heart's capacity for love is actually limitless. The more you love, the more you can love. It's not like a bucket that empties when you pour it out. It's like a spring that flows more abundantly the more you allow it to flow. This, the Buddha said, is my final teaching to you on metta. Practice it, live it, become it. And may all beings everywhere, including you, including me, be safe, be healthy, be happy. The disciples bowed deeply, receiving this teaching as the gift it was, and they carried it forward, teaching it to others, who taught it to others, who taught it to others, until it reached you, tonight, 25 centuries later, in a completely different world, but the teaching remains the same. The heart's capacity for love is limitless, and you are invited to discover that for yourself. And so, we come to the end of this journey. Through 4 profound teachings from the Buddha, we began with Kisāgotamī, who learned that grief is universal, that loss connects us rather than isolates us. We continued with Pattākāra, who survived the unsurvivable, who discovered that peace is possible even after losing everything. We explored the teaching of the raft, learning when to hold and when to release, when something serves us and when it becomes a burden. And we concluded with the practice of metta, the cultivation of a heart so vast, it embraces all beings, including yourself. 4 stories, 4 teachings, all pointing toward the same truth, that life includes suffering, but suffering doesn't have the final word. That change is constant, but within that change, there's a peace that doesn't depend on things staying the same, that you are worthy of love, of kindness, of gentleness, not because you've earned it, but because you exist. As you lie here now, in the deep stillness of night, your body heavy, your breath slow, your mind drifting between waking and sleeping, I want you to know that you've done enough today. You've carried enough. You've tried enough. You've been enough. Whatever you're facing in your life, whatever grief you carry, whatever you're trying to let go of, whatever harshness you've been directing toward yourself, you can set it down now, just for tonight, just for this moment. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to become anyone different. You don't have to prove your worth. You can just be here, breathing, resting, being held by the earth beneath you, by the air around you, by the vast, mysterious universe that brought you into existence. You belong here. You're not a mistake. You're not an accident. You're a necessary part of this unfolding story of life. The Buddha taught these truths 25 centuries ago, and they've survived because they're true, not just then, but now, not just for those ancient monks, but for you, right here, right now, in your bed, in your life, with all your struggles and all your beauty. These teachings are for you. The teaching that grief is not your enemy, but your teacher. The teaching that survival is possible, even when it seems impossible. The teaching that you're allowed to let go of what no longer serves you. The teaching that your heart's capacity for love has no limits. Take these with you, not as beliefs to hold rigidly, but as companions for your journey. As you sleep tonight, these teachings will work on you in ways deeper than conscious thought. Your dreams might show you what you need to see. Your body will heal what it can heal. Your heart will soften where it's ready to soften. Trust the process. Trust your own wisdom. Trust that you're exactly where you need to be, even if it doesn't feel that way. Your breath continues, inhaling, exhaling. This faithful rhythm that has never abandoned you. That will stay with you until your last moment, breathing you, living you, loving you. Feel it now. This breath, this gift, this constant reminder that life wants you here. And let everything else fall away. The worries about tomorrow, the regrets about yesterday, the endless mental commentary about whether you're doing life right. Just this, just breath, just the vast, peaceful awareness that holds everything. You are that awareness, not the thoughts that pass through, not the emotions that rise and fall, not even the body that ages and changes. You are the space in which all of that happens, and that space is already at peace, already whole, already free. The stories we've shared tonight are invitations to remember that, to return to that, to rest in that. Kisāgotamī remembered it. Patākārā remembered it. The monks practicing metta remembered it. And now you're remembering it too. Not as something new you're learning, but as something ancient. You're recognizing, oh yes, your deepest self whispers, this, I know this, I've always known this. Rest in that knowing, rest in that peace, rest in the truth that you are loved, that you've always been loved, that you'll always be loved, not by anyone specific, though perhaps by specific people too, but by life itself, by the force that creates stars and flowers, and you are loved into existence every moment. Every breath is a love letter from the universe. Every heartbeat is proof that you belong here. Sleep now, deeply, peacefully, completely. Let these teachings hold you. Let the Buddha's wisdom comfort you. Let the breath rock you, like a mother rocks her child. And when you wake tomorrow, you won't remember all the words. You won't need to. What matters will remain in your heart. A little more gentleness toward yourself. A little more space around your pain. A little more willingness to let go of what no longer serves. A little more opening toward love. That's enough. That's everything. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be at ease. May you be happy. May all beings everywhere be safe, be healthy, be at ease, be happy. May we all find the peace that passes understanding, the peace that was never lost, just forgotten. Good night, dear one. Sleep well. You've earned your rest, and may the Buddha's teachings on grief, on survival, on letting go, and on love bless you, now and always. Rest, breathe, be. You are enough. You've always been enough. Good night. You have learned to hold yourself with kindness, to extend that warmth to all beings, to recognize that we all share the same struggles, the same longing for peace. You have practiced sending goodwill to those you love, to those you find difficult, and to yourself. You have discovered that the heart, when opened, has no limits to its capacity for compassion. Now, as we approach the final story of this journey, let me share the most powerful truth of all. No matter how lost you have been, no matter how broken, no matter what you have done, or what has been done to you, transformation is always possible. The darkness you carry does not define your future. Each moment offers a chance to begin again. This is the story of Angulimala, the man who was called Finger Garland, a name that struck terror into every heart. He was a serial killer, a monster, who wore a necklace of human fingers, who left a trail of death across the kingdom of Kosala. And yet, he met the Buddha, and in that meeting, everything changed. This is not just his story. This is the story of what happens when we finally stop running, when we face what we have become, when we dare to believe that even the darkest night can give birth to dawn. Let his journey remind you that you, too, can transform. You, too, can find peace. No matter where you have been, settle deeper now. Let your body rest fully and listen. His name was Ahimsaka, which means the harmless one. But no one, I called him that anymore. They called him Angulimala, Finger Garland. And when they spoke his name, their voices dropped to whispers, their eyes darted to the shadows, and their hands reached for their children. He lived in the Jalini forest, near the town of Savatthi, in the kingdom ruled by King Pasenadi of Kosala. And in that forest, terror had made its home. The roads were empty. Merchants refused to travel, even in large caravans. Families locked their doors at sunset and would not open them until the sun was high. The tax collectors stopped their rounds. The woodcutters abandoned their work. And even then, they moved quickly, gripping their weapons with white knuckles. Because in that forest, Angulimala hunted. He was not hunting animals. He was hunting people. And when he caught them, he killed them. And he cut off one finger from each victim's hand. And he strung those fingers on a cord that he wore around his neck. The count had reached 99. 99 lives ended, 99 families destroyed, 99 fingers on a garland of death. The people whispered that he was not human anymore, that he had become a demon, a yaksha, a creature of pure violence. They said he could run faster than a horse, that he never tired, that his eyes burned with madness. They said he showed no mercy, that he killed men, women, even children, anyone who crossed his path. But Angulimala had not always been a monster. He had been a student once, a brilliant young Brahmin from a good family, sent to study under a renowned teacher in Taxila. He excelled in his studies. He memorized the Vedas. He learned philosophy, logic, and rhetoric. His teachers praised him. His fellow students envied him. He was destined for greatness, they said. But one teacher, his final master, saw that brilliance and felt threatened. Or perhaps the teacher's wife desired the young, handsome student. And when he rejected her advances, she turned her desire into rage and lies. She whispered poison into her husband's ear. She claimed Angulimala had tried to seduce her, had insulted her, had plotted against the teacher. The teacher's jealousy fueled by his wife's lies, became a cold hatred. He could not simply expel the student or harm him directly, for Angulimala's reputation was too strong, his family too influential. So the teacher devised a plan. He called Angulimala to him and said, "You have completed your studies. You have learned everything I can teach. But there is one final requirement, one last offering you must make to your teacher before I can grant you your graduation." Angulimala bowed respectfully. "Anything, master. Name it, and I will fulfill it." The teacher smiled, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You must bring me 1,000 human fingers." Angulimala stared at him, certain he had misheard. "Master, 1,000 fingers," the teacher repeated. "Only then will your education be complete." It was an impossible task, a grotesque demand, a curse disguised as a final lesson. The teacher expected Angulimala to refuse, to be horrified, to leave in shame. Or, perhaps, he expected him to attempt it and be killed by soldiers or villagers. Either way, the teacher would be rid of him. But Angulimala had been trained to obey his teacher. Absolutely. In the culture of his time, a student's devotion to his guru was sacred, unquestionable, and so something broke inside him. His mind, unable to reconcile the horror of the command with his duty to obey, twisted. The brilliant student became the killer. Ahisaka, the harmless one, became Angulimala, the monster with the finger garland. He fled to the forest and began his gruesome work. At first, he may have felt horror at what he was doing, but with each killing, the horror faded. The mind protects itself from unbearable guilt by numbing, by dissociating, by creating a new identity that can do what the old self could not. Angulimala stopped feeling. He became a machine of death. He perfected his methods. He learned to track, to ambush, to kill quickly. He wore the fingers as proof, counting each one, moving toward the impossible goal of 1,000. By the time he reached 99, the entire region was paralyzed with fear. King Pasenadi himself was forced to act. His people were terrified. His economy was collapsing. His authority was being challenged by a single man who seemed unstoppable. The king gathered his army, 500 soldiers, and announced he would personally lead them into the Jalini forest to capture or kill Angulimala. But Angulimala's mother heard of the king's plan. Despite everything, despite the monster her son had become, she was still his mother. She loved him, and she set out, alone, an old woman walking into the forest of death, hoping to find her son and warn him. Before the king's army arrived, she did not know that her son needed only one more finger to reach his goal of 100. She did not know that when she found him, he would see her not as his mother, but as the final victim he needed. This was the moment when everything hung in balance. Angulimala stood at the edge of the ultimate horror, ready to kill the woman who had given him life. The darkness was complete. There was no lower place to fall. He was beyond redemption, beyond hope, beyond humanity. And into that darkness, the Buddha walked. The Buddha had been staying in Savatthi, teaching in the Jetavana monastery. When he became aware of Angulimala's situation, with the divine eye of wisdom, he saw what was about to happen. saw the mother walking toward her death, saw the son poised to commit the ultimate sin, saw the king's army preparing for slaughter, and he saw something else. He saw that Angulimala's mind, despite everything, was not completely closed. There was still a small opening, a tiny crack in the armor of his madness, a possibility for awakening. The conditions were right. The timing was now. The Buddha's attendant, Ananda, saw the master preparing to leave and asked where he was going. When the Buddha said he was going to the Jalini forest, Ananda was horrified. "Lord, you cannot. Angulimala is there. He has killed 99 people. Even large groups of travelers are not safe. Please, do not go alone." The other monks gathered, pleading with him. The villagers, hearing of his plan, came running, begging him to reconsider. "Venerable sir, he will kill you. He shows no mercy. He is insane. 10 men, 20 men, even 30 men have gone into that forest and never returned. Please, do not go." But the Buddha smiled gently and said, "Do not worry. What must be done will be done." And he took up his robe and bowl and walked calmly toward the forest. The path into the Jalini forest was overgrown. No one had traveled it in months. The trees grew thick and close. The sunlight barely penetrated the canopy. Birds did not sing here. Animals had fled. There was only silence, the heavy, waiting silence of a place where death lives. The Buddha walked steadily, his pace unhurried, his mind perfectly calm. Angulimala, hunting in the forest, saw his mother approaching in the distance. He recognized her walk, the shape of her body, the way she moved, and his mind, locked in its obsession, calculated coldly. She would be the 100th. She would complete his task. He gripped his sword and began moving toward her, silent as a shadow. But then he saw another figure on the path, a monk walking alone, wearing simple robes, carrying a begging bowl, an easy target, a vulnerable victim. And Angulimala's twisted logic made a decision. He would take the monk first. It would be quick. Then he would still have time for his mother. 101. His mother could be 101. He changed direction, moving through the trees to intercept the monk. When he stepped onto the path, blocking the way, he expected the monk to react, as all his victims had reacted: fear, panic, running, pleading, screaming. But the Buddha did not stop walking. He did not speed up. He did not look afraid. He simply continued his steady, peaceful pace directly toward Angulimala. Angulimala shouted, "Stop, stop, monk, or I will kill you." The Buddha kept walking. Angulimala was confused. Was the monk deaf, stupid, suicidal? He raised his sword and shouted again, louder. "I said, stop." The Buddha's voice, when he spoke, was soft but clear. "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not stopped." Angulimala froze. What did that mean? He had stopped walking. He was standing still. The monk was the one moving. "What are you talking about?" he snarled. "I am standing still. You are the Dunas, one walking. Stop lying, or I will cut you down where you stand." The Buddha finally stopped walking. He stood, perhaps 10 paces from Angulimala, close enough to be struck down in seconds, and he looked directly into the killer's eyes with infinite compassion. Angulimala, the Buddha said, I have stopped harming all living beings. I have given up violence forever. But you have not stopped. You continue to harm, to kill, to create suffering. So I tell you truly, I have stopped, and you have not. The words hit Angulimala like a physical blow. For the first time in months, perhaps years, something penetrated the numbness. A thought formed that was not about hunting, not about killing, not about the task. A thought that was simply, what have I become? But the momentum of his madness was strong. He shook his head, raised his sword, and charged. The Buddha turned and began walking away. Still at the same calm, steady pace, Angulimala ran after him, sword raised, closing the distance in seconds. But he could not reach him. No matter how fast he ran, the Buddha remained the same distance ahead, walking, not running, not hurrying, just walking. It should have been impossible. Angulimala was known for his speed, for his ability to run down any victim, but he could not catch this monk. He ran harder, his breath ragged, his muscles burning. The monk continued walking. The distance did not change. Angulimala stopped, gasping, sweat pouring down his face. What sorcery is this? He shouted. Stand still, face me, like a man. The Buddha stopped and turned. I have stopped, Angulimala. When will you stop? And in that moment, something inside Angulimala broke. The crack widened. The armor shattered. He dropped his sword. It fell to the ground with a dull thud, and he began to weep. 99 fingers hung around his neck. 99 lives ended. And for the first time, he saw what he had done. The numbness was gone. The dissociation was gone. The false identity of the monster was gone. And all that remained was a human being, drowning in horror and grief at what he had become. He fell to his knees. What have I done? What have I done? The Buddha stepped closer, his voice infinitely gentle. You have caused great suffering, but suffering can end. Angulimala, even now, it is not too late. Stop, truly stop. Not just your feet, but your mind. Stop the violence, stop the hatred, stop the delusion. You can still awaken. Angulimala looked up, his face wet with tears, his voice breaking. How? How can I awaken? Look at me. Look at what I have done. I am a monster. I am beyond saving. No one is beyond saving. The Buddha said, come, follow me. Become a monk. Leave this life behind. The path is open to you if you choose to walk it. But how can I be forgiven? How can I forgive myself? The Buddha's smile was sad and wise. Forgiveness is not the point. Transformation is. You cannot undo the past, but you can stop creating more suffering. You can walk a new path. The choice is yours. Angulimala looked at the sword on the ground. He looked at the garland of fingers around his neck. He looked at the Buddha's face, radiant with peace and compassion, and he chose. He removed the garland, let it fall to the earth, and said, "I will follow you." The Buddha ordained him there, in the forest, with the simple words, "Come, monk, practice the holy life." And Angulimala, the killer, became Angulimala, the monk. His mother, arriving moments later, found her son alive, robes changed, sword abandoned, walking beside the Buddha out of the forest. She wept with relief and disbelief. The king's army, marching into the forest with weapons raised, found no monster to fight, only an empty clearing, a pile of fingers being buried by villagers, and a sword rusting in the grass. But this was not the end of Angulimala's story. This was only the beginning. Becoming a monk did not erase Angulimala's past. Putting on robes did not erase the memories. Walking beside the Buddha did not erase the 99 lives he had taken. When they returned to the Jetavana monastery in Savatthi, the other monks were shocked. Some were afraid, others were angry. They whispered among themselves, "This is Angulimala, the murderer. How can the master accept him? How can we live beside him?" The Buddha addressed their concerns directly. He called an assembly and said, "Monks, this man has done terrible things, but he has stopped. He has seen the truth of his actions. He has chosen a new path. We do not reject those who turn toward the light, no matter how deep their darkness has been. If we did, what hope would there be for anyone?" The monks, trusting the Buddha's wisdom, accepted Angulimala's presence, though many remained wary. But the greater challenge was not inside the monastery. It was outside, in the town, where the people had not forgotten. When Angulimala walked through Savatthi on arms round, going door to door with his begging bowl, as all monks did, the people recognized him immediately. The whispers turned to shouts, the fear turned to rage. "Murderer, killer, how dare you? Show your face here." Doors slammed shut before he could approach. Mothers pulled their children inside. Men spat at his feet when he stood silently, waiting for alms, as monks do, asking for nothing, simply standing. With his bowl, the people threw stones. The first stone struck his shoulder. The second hit his head, drawing blood. The third and fourth and fifth followed. Angulimala stood still, not defending himself, not running. Blood ran down his face. His bowl fell from his hands. Still, he did not move. A crowd gathered, shouting insults, throwing more stones, calling for his death. "The king should have executed you. You should be in chains. You should be tortured, as you tortured others." Finally, some monks saw what was happening and helped him back to the monastery. His robes were torn. His body was bruised and bleeding. His face was swollen. The Buddha saw him and asked, "What happened, Angulimala?" Angulimala, struggling to speak, through split lips, said, "Lord, The people threw stones. They hate me. They want me dead. The Buddha's face was calm, but his eyes held deep compassion. Endure, Angulimala. Patiently, endure. You are experiencing, in this life, the results of actions that would have brought you countless lifetimes of suffering in the hells. Endure it. This is the burning away of old karma. Let it burn. Do not react with hatred. Do not react with self-pity. Simply endure and continue your practice. Angulimala bowed his head and wept, not from the physical pain, which was intense, but from the understanding that he deserved this, and far worse. How could he expect forgiveness? How could he expect kindness? He had shown none. But the Buddha's next words changed everything. Angulimala, transformation does not mean the consequences of your past actions disappear. Karma is not erased by regret. The people's anger is understandable. Their pain is real. You caused that pain. But here is what you must understand. You are not that person anymore. The one who killed 99 people. That mind state, that delusion is gone. You have stopped. You have changed. And every moment you continue to practice. Every moment you do not react with anger. Every moment you choose peace. You prove that change is real. But Lord, Angulimala said, his voice breaking, how can I live with what I have done? How can I meditate when the faces of my victims haunt me? How can I find peace when I have destroyed so much peace? The Buddha sat beside him, and his voice was infinitely gentle. You find peace by understanding that guilt, when it becomes a prison, creates more suffering, not less. Yes, you must acknowledge what you have done. Yes, you must feel the weight of it. But you must not let that weight crush you into despair. Because in despair, you are useless. In despair, you cannot help anyone. But if you transform, if you awaken, if you become a source of wisdom and compassion, then your life can still create good in this world. Is that possible? Angulimala whispered. Can I ever create more good than the harm I have done? Perhaps not, in terms of raw quantity, the Buddha said, but in terms of what you can teach others. Yes, your story can give hope to those who think they are beyond hope. Your transformation can prove that change is possible. Every person who hears your story and thinks, if even he can change, then perhaps I can too. That is good, flowing from your new path. Angulimala looked up, his eyes red from tears and from the blows he had received. Then I will continue. I will endure. I will practice, no matter how long it takes. The Buddha smiled. That is all that is required. Not perfection, not immediate enlightenment, just the willingness to continue, to endure, to keep walking the path. The rest will unfold in its own time. And so, Angulimala returned to his practice. He meditated on loving kindness, sending goodwill to all beings, including those who hated him. He meditated on compassion, wishing that all beings be free from suffering, including himself. He meditated on the impermanence of all things, understanding that even his guilt, even his pain, was not permanent, not solid, not who he truly was. The attacks continued. Every alms round brought more stones, more insults, more hatred. But Angulimala endured. He did not fight back. He did not argue. He did not try to defend himself or explain himself. He simply continued practicing, walking the path, moment by moment. And slowly, very slowly, something began to shift. Inside him, the guilt did not disappear, but it became workable. The memories did not fade, but they lost their power to paralyze him. He began to find moments of peace, brief but real. In his meditation, the other monks, seeing his endurance, his humility, his dedication to practice, despite everything, began to soften. Toward him, they saw that his transformation was genuine. They began to treat him not as a monster in monk's robes, but as a fellow practitioner struggling toward awakening. And then, one day, something happened that changed everything. Again, King Pasenadi of Kosala came to visit the Buddha at the Jetavana monastery. The king was a devoted supporter of the Buddha's teaching, and he came often to hear discourses and to ask questions about the Dhamma. On this particular day, the king arrived with a large retinue of soldiers. He bowed respectfully to the Buddha and sat down to one side. The Buddha asked, "Great king, where are you coming from at this hour with armor and weapons and so many men?" The king sighed heavily. "Lord, I have been dealing with the problem Angulimala. He has terrorized my kingdom for too long. 99 people dead. The roads are unsafe. My people live in fear. I have been searching the forest with my army, but we cannot find him. It is as if he has vanished. I fear he is still killing in secret." The Buddha smiled gently. "Great king, what if I told you that Angulimala has given up killing, that he has shaved his head, put on the ochre robe, and gone forth from home into homelessness, that he now abstains from killing, from stealing, from lying, and practices the holy life?" The king looked at the Buddha in disbelief. "Lord, if that were true, I would bow to him. I would provide him with robes, alms food, lodging, and medicine. I would offer him protection. But Lord, how could such a violent, unrestrained man become restrained? It seems impossible." The Buddha turned slightly away, meditating quietly under a tree. "Great king, that is Angulimala." The king started, his hand moving instinctively to his sword. His soldiers stepped forward, placing themselves between the king and the monk. The king's face went pale. That is him, the murderer? Here, he is a murderer. No longer, the Buddha said calmly. He has stopped. He has changed. He practices with diligence. He harms no one. The king stared at Angulimala, who had opened his eyes at the commotion, but remained seated, his hands folded peacefully in his lap. The king saw the scars on his head from stones. He saw the thin, humble figure in worn robes. He saw the calm, sad eyes that held no threat, only a deep weariness. The king's fear slowly gave way to wonder. Is it truly possible? Can a man who has done such things really change? Come, the Buddha said. See for yourself. The king approached cautiously, his soldiers close behind. He stood before Angulimala and studied his face. Angulimala bowed deeply, saying nothing. Do you remember what you have done? The king asked, his voice hard. Every moment, Your Majesty, Angulimala replied quietly. I will remember until my last breath. Do you regret it? Regret is too small a word. Your Majesty, I live in a constant state of horror at what I was, but I have stopped. I will never harm another being again. The king looked at the Buddha. Lord, this is extraordinary. I cannot imagine the strength it takes to carry such guilt and continue living and continue practicing. I confess, I do not know if I could forgive him if he had harmed someone I loved, but I can see that he has changed, and if even Angulimala can change, then perhaps there is hope for all of us, for all our faults and failures. The king bowed to Angulimala, as he had said he would, and offered his support. Then he returned to sit with the Buddha, shaking his head in amazement. Lord, this teaching of yours is remarkable, that it can take a man so lost and bring him back. This is true power. After the king left, Angulimala sat in meditation, but his mind was turbulent. The king's words echoed. I do not know if I could forgive him if he had harmed someone I loved. Angulimala understood. He would not forgive himself either if he were them. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not expect it. He knew that what he had done could never be made right. 99 families destroyed, 99 holes torn in the fabric of the world that could never be repaired. But he also understood what the Buddha had been teaching him. The past could not be changed. All he could do was ensure that from this moment forward, he created no more suffering. That was not redemption. That was not earning forgiveness. It was simply stopping the harm. And yet, the question remained, was that enough? Could a person who had done what he had done ever truly be at peace? The answer came unexpectedly. A few weeks later, in the form of a woman's scream, Angulimala was walking on arms round through the outskirts of Savatthi. He had learned to take routes that avoided the main streets, where the crowds were largest and the anger most intense. He walked quietly through the smaller paths, hoping to receive even a small amount of food without being attacked. As he walked, he heard a sound that stopped him in his tracks. A woman's cry, raw with pain and fear, coming from a house just off the path. He hesitated. Every instinct told him to keep walking. He was the last person who should approach a house where someone was suffering. His presence would only make things worse. But the cry came again, desperate, agonized. Angulimala set down his bowl and moved closer. Through the open door, he saw a woman lying on a mat, her body twisted in labor. An older woman, perhaps her mother, knelt beside her, looking terrified. There was blood, too much blood. Something was very wrong. The older woman looked up and saw Angulimala. Her eyes widened in recognition and horror. "You, get away. Leave us. Alone." "I mean no harm," Angulimala said quickly. "What is wrong? Can I help?" "Help?" The woman spat. "You are Angulimala. You are a killer. Get out!" The pregnant woman screamed again, her face pale, her body convulsing. She was dying. The baby was dying. It was clear to anyone watching. Angulimala felt a wave of helplessness. He turned to leave, but the pregnant woman's eyes caught his. In her pain, in her terror, she looked at him and gasped, "Please, anyone, help me." She did not recognize him. She only saw a monk, and in her desperation, she was asking him for help. Angulimala's mind raced. He knew nothing about childbirth. He had no skills to offer, but he had to do something. He turned and ran back to the monastery, moving faster than he had moved. Since his days of hunting, he found the Buddha and, gasping for breath, explained what he had seen. "Lord, there is a woman in labor, and she is dying. I do not know what to do. Please, is there anything I can do?" The Buddha looked at him with deep compassion and said, "Angulimala, go back to her. Sit beside her and speak this truth. Sister, since I was born in the noble birth, I do not recall intentionally depriving any living being of life. By this truth, may you be safe, and may your baby be safe." Angulimala stared at him. "Lord, how can I say that? I have killed 99 people." The Buddha's voice was firm but gentle. "Since you were born in the noble birth, Angulimala, since you became a monk, since you truly stopped, since that new life began, you have not intentionally harmed any living being. That is the truth. Speak it." Angulimala understood. The old life was dead. The person who killed was gone. In his rebirth as a monk, he had harmed no one. That was true. He ran back to the house. The older woman tried to block him, but the pregnant woman, barely conscious, whispered, "Let him, let anyone who can help." Angulimala knelt beside her. He took her hand, and she gripped it with desperate strength. He spoke clearly, his voice shaking with emotion. "Sister, since I was born, in the noble birth, I do not recall intentionally depriving any living being of life. By this truth, may you be safe, and may your baby be safe." The words hung in the air. They were not magic. They were not a spell. They were simply the truth spoken with the full force of his conviction, his transformation, his desperate wish for this woman and her child to live. And something shifted. The woman's breathing, which had been shallow and ragged, began to steady. The bleeding slowed. Her body, which had been rigid with pain, began to relax. And moments later, with a final cry, the baby was born. A healthy, wailing, perfect baby boy. The older woman caught the baby, cleaned him, wrapped him in cloth, and placed him in his mother's arms. The mother wept with relief and joy, holding her son close. She looked up at Angulimala, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you, thank." Angulimala could not speak. He bowed deeply and left the house, his entire body trembling. He walked back to the monastery. In a daze, he had taken 99 lives, and now he had helped save one. He had not healed anyone with magic. He had not earned redemption, but he had, for the first time since his transformation, created something good. He had been a presence of help, not harm. He had spoken truth, and that truth had mattered. When he told the Buddha what had happened, the Buddha smiled. "This is the power of truth, Angulimala, and this is the power of transformation. You did not undo the past, but you created a new present. That woman will tell her son this story. That boy will grow up knowing that even a man who had done terrible things helped bring him safely into the world. Your story will give hope, not just despair." Angulimala bowed, his heart breaking and healing at the same time. He understood now that he would never balance the scales. He would never make up for what he had done. But he could still create good. He could still help. And perhaps that was enough. Not redemption, but continuation. Not forgiveness, but transformation. He returned to his meditation with renewed determination. And in the days that followed, he practiced with an intensity that astonished the other monks. He was determined to reach the end of suffering, not for himself, but so that his life could be proof of the teaching's power. And then, one day, it happened. It came, suddenly, as awakening often does, after long preparation. Angulimala was meditating alone in the forest near the monastery, sitting beneath a tree in the early morning. The air was cool. The birds were beginning to sing. The light was soft and grey. The sun, not yet risen. He had been contemplating impermanence, watching his breath rise and fall, watching thoughts appear and dissolve, watching sensations in his body arise and pass away. Everything was in flux. Nothing was solid. Nothing was permanent. Even the identity of Angulimala, the murderer, was not solid, not permanent. It was a story, a pattern of thoughts, a memory, but not who he was. In this moment, there was only awareness, only presence, only the simple fact of being alive, breathing, sitting, watching, and then the final layer of grasping released. He saw it clearly. Even the one who was trying to awaken, even the one who was practicing, even the one who carried guilt and sought peace, that too was not solid, not permanent, not self. There was no one to redeem. There was no one to save. There was only this process of experience, unfolding moment by moment, without any separate entity controlling it. The sense of self, the deep feeling of I am this person with this history and this burden, dissolved like mist in sunlight. What remained was peace, not the peace of having solved a problem, but the peace of realizing there was no problem to solve. The past had happened. It could not be changed. The guilt had been real, but it too was impermanent, not solid, not who he was. And the present moment, free of grasping, free of aversion, free of delusion, was simply clear, luminous, open. Angulimala opened his eyes. The world looked the same. The trees, the path, the monastery in the distance. But everything had changed. There was no fear, no guilt, no burden. Not because he had escaped those things, but because he had finally seen through them. He had reached the end of suffering. He was an arahant, a fully awakened being. He stood up, slowly, feeling the strength in his legs, the solidness of the earth beneath his feet. He walked back to the monastery, his movements easy, natural, free. The Buddha saw him approach and smiled. Without a word, the Buddha knew. Angulimala bowed deeply, and the Buddha said, "Welcome, Angulimala. You have done what needed to be done." Angulimala said simply, "I was lost, and now I am found. I was bound, and now I am free. I was in darkness, and now I dwell in light." The other monks, seeing him, sensed the change. There was a radiance about him now, a quiet joy, a depth of peace that was unmistakable. Angulimala, the murderer, was gone. Even Angulimala, the guilt-ridden monk, was gone. What remained was simply a human being, awake, free, at peace. In the years that followed, Angulimala lived simply and quietly. He continued to go on arms round, and the attacks lessened as word spread that he had attained enlightenment. Some people still threw stones, still shouted insults, but Angulimala received it all with perfect equanimity. He felt no anger, no hurt, no need to defend himself. When people asked him how he could endure it, he said simply, "I endure nothing. There is no one here to be hurt. There is only the experience of pain, and it passes like everything else." He became a teacher in his own quiet way. He did not seek attention. He did not give grand sermons. But when people came to him, especially those who felt they were beyond hope, those who had done terrible things, those who carried unbearable guilt, he listened and he shared in his story, and many found hope in his transformation. One day, a young man came to him, weeping, "I have hurt people. I have been cruel. I have done things I cannot forgive myself for. How can I live with what I have done?" Angulimala looked at him with infinite compassion and said, "You cannot undo the past, but you can stop creating more suffering. You can change. I am proof of that. If I, who killed 99 people, can awaken, then anyone can. The path is open to you. Walk it." The young man looked at him, saw the peace in his eyes, the total absence of self-hatred, and asked, "But how do you forgive yourself?" Angulimala smiled. "I do not forgive myself. Forgiveness is not the point. I simply stopped. I saw the truth. I let go of the illusion that there is a permanent self. To forgive or condemn, there is only this moment. And in this moment, I choose not to harm. That is all. That is enough." The young man bowed and left, his heart lighter, his path clearer. Years passed. Angulimala grew old. His body weakened. He knew his death was approaching. One evening, as the sun set, he sat in meditation one final time. His mind was perfectly clear, perfectly at peace. He reflected on his life. He thought of the 99 people he had killed, and he felt a deep, aching compassion for them and for the person he had been who had killed them. He thought of the Buddha who had seen the possibility of awakening in him when no one else had. He thought of the woman in childbirth, of the baby he had helped bring safely into the world. He thought of all the people who had heard his story and found hope in it. He could not balance the scales. The harm he had done was immense, but the good he had created was real too, and in the end, What mattered was not the balance, but the transformation. He had stopped. He had changed. He had awakened. With his last breath, Angulimala whispered, "I was darkness, and I became light. May all beings find the same path. May all beings be free." And he passed away, completely at peace, completely free, leaving behind a legacy, not of his crimes, but of his transformation. Let the story of Angulimala settle into your heart now as you rest in this quiet darkness, as your body surrenders more and more deeply into sleep. His story is extreme. Yes, most of us have not done what he did. Most of us do not carry the weight of such terrible actions, but all of us, every single one of us, we carry something. We carry regrets. We carry guilt. We carry shame. We carry the memories of times when we hurt others, times when we failed, times when we were not who we wanted to be. And many of us carry the belief that we are beyond redemption, that we are too broken, too flawed, too lost to ever truly change. Angulimala's story tells us that this belief is false. No matter what you have done, no matter where you have been, no matter how lost you feel, transformation is possible. Change is real. The darkness you carry does not define your future. Each moment, each breath, each choice you make is an opportunity to stop, to turn, to walk a new path. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to erase your past. You simply need to stop creating more suffering and start creating something different. The Buddha did not erase Angulimala's karma. The people did not forgive him easily. The consequences of his actions did not disappear, but Angulimala changed. He stopped, and in that stopping, in that transformation, he found peace, not by escaping his past, but by no longer being controlled by it. This is what is possible for you too. Whatever you are struggling with, whatever weight you carry, you can set it down, not by pretending it does not exist, but by seeing it clearly and choosing in this moment not to let it dictate your next step. You have journeyed through 5 stories tonight. You have walked with Kisāgotamī as she learned to accept the universality of death. You have survived total devastation with Patakara and found that even in the ashes, life continues. You have released the raft of attachments that once saved you, but now hold you back. You have opened your heart to metta, to loving kindness, to compassion for yourself and all beings, and now you have witnessed the ultimate transformation, the journey from the darkest night to the brightest dawn. These stories are not just ancient tales, They are maps. They are mirrors. They are invitations. They invite you to see that you are not alone in your struggle. That pain is universal. That change is possible. That the path to peace is open to everyone without exception. As you lie here now, breathing softly, your body heavy and warm, your mind beginning to drift into sleep, let yourself imagine to your own transformation. What would it feel like to wake up tomorrow and choose differently, to speak with kindness instead of harshness, to forgive instead of holding on to resentment, to let go instead of clinging, to extend compassion instead of judgment, especially to yourself? You do not need to make grand changes. You do not need to become a completely different person overnight. You simply need to stop in one small way creating suffering and start in one small way creating peace. That is enough. That is how transformation begins. Angulimala stopped running. He faced what he had become, and he chose to walk a new path. You can do the same. You can stop running from your pain. Stop hiding from your guilt. Stop believing that you are beyond hope. You can face yourself with honesty and compassion, and you can choose right now, in this moment, to walk toward the light. The dawn is always possible, no matter how long the night has been. Feel your breath now, slow and steady, rising and falling like gentle waves. Each inhale is a new beginning. Each exhale is a letting go. Inhale, hope. Exhale, regret. Inhale, possibility. Exhale, fear. Inhale, peace. Exhale, all that you no longer need to carry. You are not your past. You are not your mistakes. You are not the story you have been telling yourself about who you are. You are this moment, this breath, this awareness. And in this moment, you are free to choose. Choose kindness. Choose peace. Choose to stop creating suffering and start creating healing, one small moment at a time. The Buddha saw the possibility of awakening in Angulimala when no one else did. And I tell you now, there is that same possibility in you. No matter how lost you feel, no matter how broken, no matter how much darkness you carry, the light is already within you. It has always been there. It is simply waiting for you to stop and turn and toward it. Let these stories accompany you into your dreams tonight. Let them remind you that transformation is real, that healing is possible, that you are never beyond hope. Let them be seeds planted in the soil of your heart, seeds that will grow in the days and weeks to come, bringing forth new growth, new understanding, new peace. And when you wake, tomorrow, whenever that is, let it be a new dawn, not a day burdened by the past, but a day open to possibility, a day where you can practice, even in small ways, the lessons of these stories, a day where you can be a little kinder to yourself, a little more compassionate to others, a little more free from the stories that have held you captive. You have walked a long journey tonight through grief and loss, through letting go and opening the heart, through the darkest night and into the dawn. And now you are ready to rest, to sleep deeply and peacefully, knowing that you are held by something larger than your pain, something wiser than your fear, something more powerful than your guilt. You are held by the truth that all things change, that suffering can end, that the path to peace is always available, always open, always waiting for you to take the next step. Sleep now, dear friend. Sleep deeply and well. Let your body rest completely. Let your mind release all its burdens. Let your heart be light, and know that when you wake, the dawn will be waiting. Your dawn, your new beginning, your transformation. It is already happening. It has already begun, and you are not alone. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. May you be free. May you awaken to the truth of who you truly are, beyond all stories, beyond all guilt, beyond all fear. May you know in the deepest part of yourself that you are worthy of love, of peace, of transformation, no matter what has come before. Sleep now. The journey continues, and the dawn is coming. It is always coming. Rest now. Just rest.